welcome to my channel, Lunatic Plays. I'm the lunatic who plays World of Warcraft! Hi guys, I'm back, a little redesign. Sorry, my chat and my Streamlabs is over there. If you see me pointing over there, I'm either pointing at you, or I'm pointing at Streamlabs. It's over there. Anyways, now you know. There you go. Behind the cameras. Hi guys, how is everyone? Hi Ma, hi Raven. Welcome. I'm back. A little redesign of the way that the stream looks. I put in a little bit of work. I'm taking my time with things, getting things over the line. We're back with a very chill out session of World of Warcraft. Let me just... Is it gonna show up? Is it gonna show up? No. Okay. Do you guys hear me okay? Is the volume, everything okay? Yeah, okay, you can hear me all right. Okay, that's cool. Let me... World of Warcraft. Okay, can you see it? You should be able to see it now. I have a couple of errands to run in World of Warcraft. Remix carries on. My mage is pretty much all set and done. I'm up to date with all the campaigns. I did all the achievements I wanted. I did all the class order hauls. I just finished the class order haul on my shaman, but I have the insurrection achievement to do today. So I'm gonna do that. But I feel like the WoW thing is a little bit of a background thing because we're also going to be reacting to videos. Because before I went on my little hiatus a while back, we were doing this thing, and honestly I enjoy it because every time I play games or whatever, I watch YouTube videos, and I love podcasts, and I love to find out information. I like true crime, I love philosophy. I'm sort of obsessed with the war in Ukraine, and I watch a lot of Polish content about Russia and about the situation, and try to educate myself because I'm Polish, so it kind of really strikes me as being very close to my heart and my family. So I find out a lot of this information, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because YouTube has this new feature, and it might not be the best. It's early days, but this feature is that it's an auto translate. So basically AI translates stuff from whatever language into another language. So a lot of the stuff that I'm watching in Polish on the Polish internet actually now is capable of being translated into English. So I sort of want to start covering a lot of the stuff because there's some really great podcasters, there's some really good journalists, there's some really amazing content creators, and honestly I wish I could bring it to you guys because I have a feeling like the West has to know about it, and it's not all going to be like war and Putin and stuff like that. There is that, but it's other things as well. I made a list of things that actually have the auto translate feature so that we can watch it, and I made this amazing thing. I made a wheel of atrocities because let's face it, it's mostly terrible things, and we're gonna spin the wheel, and the wheel is gonna tell us what we're gonna watch. And once we get through the content that's on this list, I'll make a new one. I'm open to suggestions. I would say probably suggestions best to be dropped into Discord. If you want to be with me here on the journey of the channel, I highly recommend that you like, subscribe, drop a comment. If you want to be included in the Discord, show up to the live streams a couple of times, ask me to join, and then we evaluate it on the case by case. We don't accept maybe someone right away if we never heard of them, but if we see your name appear if you interact with us a couple of times, we'll invite you in. So, yeah. yeah, I think like that's the thing. I'm gonna bring up the browser here with the wheel of atrocities. Um, 1 second. I feel like okay. Should I make the podcast the primary window and World of Warcraft the secondary window, or should I make World of Warcraft the primary window and the podcast the secondary window? Because like some of them have certain visual stuff in it, some of them don't. So how do you prefer to watch this? Anyways, here is here is my wheel of atrocities. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I want you guys, I want to react to, I want to watch. Obviously, Ima, Raven, my friends, my best friends are in the chat. So I want to watch this mostly with them, but anyone is welcome, and I want to react for you guys as well, and I want to bring attention to these things because I think that they are important. And I also want to start doing more reaction style content. So I might at one stage do a separate channel for this. But I kind of want to get into the habit of watching things online, reacting to them, maybe start thinking up of different comments and stuff. I'm kind of like, I'm not very practiced in this, but I want to try. And we are doing the lore of World of Warcraft as well, so yeah, I'm practicing by writing essays and I'm turning it into a video essay. So that's coming. Watch out. It's on the way. All right, let me have a look at the chat because I have been blabbering for 15 minutes now. Raven is not cheating in this game. In his game, we're all clear here. Okay. Okay. Yes, so let's roll what we are gonna watch. The Wheel of Atrocities is spinning. Oh, okay. Gypsy Rose Blanchard wins the race. All right, let's start with the absolutely horrifying, gut-wrenching, awful story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And I have Danielle Kirsty telling the story. I am going to go into Twitch, so this window is gonna come back in a second. I'm just gonna put on the thing. Remove this from the... Okay, and now my list: Danielle Kirsty, Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
Hi everyone.
Okay, you're gonna talk to us in a second. Danielle, mind yourself. All right, you can be here. I wonder, I always watch it here and I like my chats here. Can I switch the orientation of this window here? Because like if I could switch the chat to be on the other side of my screen and then I could move it over here. Okay, no, I'm not gonna fuck with it, but it's fine. So Gypsy Rose Blanchard, probably heard about it. Ima hasn't, so that's why it's on the list. Ima wants to know the full story, and I find like, I know that Bailey Sarian did a number on Gypsy Rose Blanchard, but I find that Danielle Kirsty has much more thorough coverage than probably most of the true crime girlies out there. So I'm gonna make a pinned post on Twitch. If you want to get the link for the full video, it's going to be on Twitch. So let me post it in here and pin. The message is pinned. We will unpin it when we finish the pod. I'm just gonna add it also here. Plus Story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard reaction. Okay. I'm just adding it to the name of the stream just so that everything checks out. Sorry guys, all these organizational matters with the social media can be overwhelming, but here it is. I will add, I guess, the link to the well, I can do this now. I can add this. I can add the link to the transcript of the live stream on YouTube as well. So bear with me, you guys. Bear with me a minute. It's okay, Ima. You are hard at work, making the world a better place. Okay, I'm dropping it into the resources. All right, everything checks out. Please follow Danielle. She's incredible. She really is an incredible YouTuber. Her true crime stuff it's so good. And here. And why is it not? Okay. All right. 1 second. Nope, that's not the one. Oh. And here she is. Okay. So I'll do stuff in World of Warcraft. We can listen to it. I'll pause it when I want to comment stuff. You guys know the drill. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I'm here. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I hope you're all doing well.
Is her volume okay?
Oh my god, I'm mentally preparing myself for today's video because I know it's going to be a long video. And today we are covering a case that most, if not all of you, know about because it has been everywhere recently. And that is the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. This case has been all over social media. It's been on the news. It's been discussed on morning TV shows.
Well, I'm doing great.
And that is because Gypsy Rose Blanchard was released from prison literally just last month on the 28th of December.
I put her content up because, well, not only does I feel like she does a much more deep dive than most people. As you can see, like her video is 2 hours long almost, but also she's released this after Gypsy's release from prison, so we're gonna get a little update on her post-prison, post-sentence life. It's a little bit outdated, so maybe we can get an addendum video afterwards to what happened after this, because I think that she's done this a good year ago at this point.
About 2023. However, even though it feels like this case has been everywhere, there may still be some of you that don't really know this case. Back in 2015, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was a part of a horrific murder and she was sent to prison. And people were so confused. Why was Gypsy Rose Blanchard in prison? Gypsy Rose Blanchard, to the outside world, was an incredibly sick child.
It just proves that happy endings are not just in fairy tales, they're real.
She had so many different illnesses and disorders. For example, she had leukemia, epilepsy, asthma, muscular dystrophy. She had to be in a wheelchair. She couldn't walk. She had problems with her eyes, with her ears, with her stomach. She couldn't eat. She had to be fed through a tube. So people were so confused. They were like, how has this sick child that can't even get out of her wheelchair, how has she been a part of this murder? But it was when she was arrested that it was revealed to the world that everything was a lie. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was not a sick child. She was perfectly healthy. And she wasn't even a child. She was an adult.
Since childhood, Gypsy's mother, Dee Dee, portrayed her.
Apparently, she didn't know herself how old she was. She found out, like, in the court or something like this. Also, she found out at her court case in the courtroom that she didn't have cancer. Like, her mom made her believe that she had cancer. It was insane.
Daughter as frail, disabled, suffering from multiple illnesses including leukemia and muscular dystrophy, subjecting the girl to life in a wheelchair, a feeding tube, and unnecessary surgeries, even having some of her teeth removed. It was all a lie.
Every single one of her illnesses had been fabricated by her own mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. And why would Dee Dee do this? Why would she make up that her child was ill? Like, who does that? Well, Dee Dee was suffering from Munchausen by proxy, and she made up all of these illnesses for her daughter Gypsy because she wanted attention and sympathy from others. And Gypsy, throughout her whole life, like not just her childhood, her whole life, she was subjected to terrible abuse from her own mother. And this has to be one of, if not the worst, cases of Munchausen by proxy I have ever come across. And I wasn't going to cover this case because it does feel like everyone already knows this story, so what's the point? However, since Gypsy Rose has been released from prison, there was a new 6-part documentary released and also a new book. And there have been quite a few new revelations to this case. So since there are some new revelations to this case, I thought this was the perfect time to cover this case, but I'm going to warn you, this is going to be a roller coaster. This is going to be a very, very long video, so get comfortable.
Yeah, and then a lot of people had a lot of opinions, especially after she left the jail. I mean, we'll get to it, but it's a shit show. It is gonna be a shit show.
Grab a snack
get used
and
to it.
let's dive in. I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is Wild. Now, if you have a New Year's resolution where you want to use more clean and sustainable products this year, then Wild is a company that you absolutely need to know about, because Wild are a plastic-free deodorant company, and I have been using their products for about 2 years now, and I absolutely love them. Wild's aim is to put an end to the throwaway single-use plastic culture of everyday bathroom products by creating refillable products that actually work. Their deodorant contains no single-use plastic, the refills are compostable, and you get a premium refillable deodorant case, and you can even get your name engraved on the deodorant case to make it unique to you. Wild products are naturally vegan, powered by plants, and their formulas are cruelty-free. And I have some exciting news because Wild have just launched their 3 new limited edition scents to get rid of those winter blues. And I have the 3 new scents here, and honestly, I can't pick a favorite. They are all so good. So we have sage and eucalyptus, and this is like refreshing and earthy at the same time. Then we have linen and lilac. Oh, and this one is kind of like a fresh floral, smells like fresh laundry. And then we have purple rain, and I do think that this one might be my favorite. This one just smells fresh but rich at the same time. Does that make sense? And all 3 of the new scents also come in the sensitive formula. And Wild don't just do deodorant. They have so many products. They have shampoo bars, body bars, and refillable body wash. And for the body wash, you also get a premium case that you refill, and Wild have just recently released 2 new colors. I have the sage one here, and this is just such a pretty color. And Wild are also launching a new scent in their body wash, which is the purple rain scent, which matches the deodorant. And this refillable body wash is 100%
Oh shit.
compostable. Can you believe it? This looks like plastic. It sounds like plastic, but it's not. And Wild products are also really simple to use. You just insert your refill, screw on the top, and insert the pump. Screw that on, and you're good to go. And I know a lot of you guys have absolutely been loving Wild products since I last spoke about them. And right now, Wild are offering every single one of you 20% off every single product on their website, which is a huge discount. And you can claim that exclusive discount by clicking on the link in my description box. And then when you get to checkout, use code Danielle Kirsty, and that will get you 20% off all of their products. But don't hang around, because that discount code is only valid for the next 7 days. So if you want to try something from Wild, now is the time to do it. And using that link and my code really does help out this channel because it lets Wild know that you came from this video. And I just cannot recommend Wild products enough. I have not looked back ever since I have changed to Wild deodorant, and I have been using it for about 2 years now. And it is just a natural deodorant that I have found that works for me. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Wild once again for sponsoring today's video. But thank you to every single one of you guys watching right now, because truly, without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on the 27th of July 1991, making her a Leo, and she was born in Golden Meadow, Louisiana, to parents Rod and Dee Dee Blanchard. However, before we dive into Gypsy's life, we first need to take a look at her mother's life, Dee Dee. So Dee Dee was actually born Claudine before changing her name. I don't know if she changed it legally, but she goes by Dee Dee, so I'm just going to call her Dee Dee. She was born on the 3rd of May 1967, making her a Taurus, and she was also born in Louisiana. And until recently, not much was known about Dee Dee's upbringing, her childhood, what she possibly went through. The only thing we did know is that she was a bit manipulative, she was a liar, she was stealing things, like she was just getting into trouble for like small things. But there was never really any connection between Dee Dee's childhood and what she goes on to do. However, since Gypsy has been released from prison, there is a new documentary and a new book on this case. And there were some pretty big revelations about Dee Dee's childhood and what she went through. And I've got to say, so much more of this case now makes sense. So first of all, Dee Dee, from a very young age, was sexually abused by her own father, Claude. Yep, you heard that right. She was sexually abused by her own father. He would take her into a room on her own. It was quite often his little workshop, like it was a little shed. It was not a part of the main house. And he would molest her. He would also force Dee Dee to take baths with him throughout her childhood. And it's just like, no, this man is disgusting. And I have got to say that in the new documentary that has just been released, Claude, the father, the sexual abuser, he's actually on that documentary and he denies all of the abuse. But let's just
I saw the documentary.
say his denial is not...
But to be honest, like, I don't know what's the source of this information. I mean, the whole family had a vendetta. Like, the whole family didn't really like Dee Dee from what I saw, but also, like, okay, this information, if it came from Gypsy's book, probably Gypsy heard about it from Dee Dee, and then again, with Dee Dee being such a manipulator. Do we know? Do we not know? I mean, look, the grandpa looks shady as fuck. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the truth. I just don't know where the information is coming from.
Not very convincing. So that was the first huge revelation about Dee Dee's childhood, that she was sexually abused. But then another huge revelation about Dee Dee's childhood is that she could have also possibly been a victim of Munchausen by proxy herself. I know, I couldn't believe it when I heard that. I was like, what? I mean, what Dee Dee went through, I don't know if you could quite possibly say it's Munchausen by proxy. It's a very, very diluted version of Munchausen by proxy compared to what Gypsy went through, you know? So when Dee Dee was born, her mother, Emma, said that Dee Dee had a whole host of illnesses. And one of those illnesses was a heart murmur. And no one other than Emma, the mom, was able to verify that Dee Dee had these illnesses. It was just Emma saying, oh yes, Dee Dee has this illness, or Dee Dee has that illness. But because Dee Dee apparently had these illnesses, her mother, Emma, would now go on to completely smother her and isolate her, protect her from the world. For example, whenever Dee Dee's siblings would go outside to play, Dee Dee was never allowed to. She was not allowed outside with the other children because of her apparent heart murmur. She was never allowed to run around with the other children because she couldn't sweat. She couldn't exhaust herself because of her illnesses. She could never do any chores because she would get too tired. because of her illnesses. There was just always something wrong with Dee Dee, which kind of sounds like Munchausen by proxy, doesn't it? Nothing on the scale of what Dee Dee does to Gypsy, but you can see, okay, so this is where she learnt this from. This is where she learnt this behaviour from. And things got so bad that her mom would never let Dee Dee leave her side. Dee Dee was treated like a baby. She was completely smothered and she would get so much attention. She was also forced to sleep in the same bed as her mom. And for those of you that know this case, does this sound familiar? And Dee Dee was essentially spoilt and she was the favourite child. And over time...
Yeah, I mean, like, the whole thing is because Dee Dee was an awful liar. That's why, like... I mean... Could be true, it would explain other things, but you never know with her.
Dee Dee grew to really love Plated, and she really only had her mom in this world. Dee Dee enjoyed the constant attention that she got. So that is what we now know about Dee Dee's childhood, and like I said, a lot of things now make sense. So now
I mean, to be honest, like, my main thought when I found out this part about Dee Dee potentially having a bit of a overarching mom is that I was immediately kind of like concerned. I was just like, let's wait and see what's gonna happen if Gypsy is ever going to have a child. And how that is gonna go down. Because, like, I feel if that's the line of abuse, somehow, somewhere along the lines, these patterns tend to repeat themselves across generations. Not to call out Gypsy on anything, we'll get to it after what happened when she was out of jail, but that was my first thought when I heard this. That's all I'm gonna say. It's just like, I was like, what's gonna happen? Because at the time I watched it, I think she was still in prison. So I was like, I wonder what's gonna happen there.
Skip forward to Dee Dee's adulthood, and this is where Gypsy Rose now gets introduced to this story, because at this point Dee Dee is 24 years old and she enters into a sexual relationship with...
Thank you for the cheer. Thanks, Memdog. Un caballo me dio una cosa en la cabeza y ahora solo puedo escribir en español. Odio los caballos. I don't really know what you said. I don't know what is caballo, but dio cosa en la cabeza? Something about your head, and now you have ability to write in Spanish. What is caballo? Oh, I added custom sounds. So now, if somebody cheers or, well, I don't have the YouTube super YouTube. This, this thingy. When I'll have it, I'll learn its name. But yeah. Then it goes like, whee! And if it's a subscribe, probably as well. And then if somebody donates, there's the ka-ching ka-ching. I added that one. What's up, Memnog? Where is the southern Spanish coming from? Wait, is it Medio? Caballo? Isn't caballo a horse? Okay, I have to look this up. Oh, it's a horse. Yeah, okay. So el carne de bisón. What's the story with the southern Spanish? What's happening?
with a 17-year-old boy. Now, this really, really annoys me because pretty much every single thing that I have read on this case, every single documentary, everyone just glosses over this fact. And I'm like, no. Dee Dee is 24 and she is having sex with a 17-year-old boy. And this 17-year-old boy is a boy called Rod Blanchard. And I'm sorry, why does no one seem to see the problem here? He is a minor. And what makes this even...
Yeah, I think it kind of goes down to, especially it's happening in deep south of the United States, so the bar is already low. But I think it's kind of like this old school, very false belief that somehow men cannot be assaulted, which they can, and that was assault because he was underage.
Worse is that Dee Dee is lying to Rod and saying that she's 21 years old, which is still wrong. She's still an adult and he's still a child. But this doesn't sit right with me. No. So straight away, this relationship, it's predatory. So after Dee Dee starts a sexual relationship with a child, she soon falls pregnant, and Rod, he's only 17 years old. He's so young. And he also comes from a pretty religious, conservative household. And he has been raised to think...
Memnog, my Spanish is horrible. Why are you writing in Spanish? What's happening?
that now that Dee Dee is pregnant, there is no other option but to get married. So that is exactly what happens. 17-year-old Rod and 24-year-old Dee Dee, they got married pretty much straight away. And I assume this is possibly where Rod found out that she was actually 24 years old, not 21. But yeah. But 6 months later, before Dee Dee even gives birth, Rod wakes up. He's now 18 years old, and he realizes that he's made a big mistake. He doesn't love Dee Dee. He doesn't want to be married. So this is when the couple get a divorce, before Dee Dee even gives birth. Dee Dee is furious, by the way. And then on the 27th of July, 1991, this is when Gypsy Rose Blanchard is born. And obviously Gypsy Rose is the main focus of today's video. So after Gypsy is born, Dee Dee takes her home, and initially everything is fine. At this point, Dee Dee is living with her parents. She's still living with the dad that sexually abused her. However, it wasn't long before everything just changed. Because remember, this case is about severe Munchausen by proxy. So it was around when Gypsy was approximately 3 months old. One night she was sleeping, nothing was wrong, but Dee Dee noticed that Gypsy had stopped breathing, and Gypsy was rushed to the emergency room. Now, this is still not a big deal. It's actually pretty common.
Actually, something that kind of just popped into my mind. Oh, okay. I know the joke that you are making, Memnog. Was it a series? Was it a sketch that the horse kicked you in the head and now you speak in Spanish, but you don't know that you're speaking Spanish? I know it. What I was gonna say, Dee Dee. So about Dee Dee, why am I blanking? It seems like she had this. I don't know how to phrase it properly. Like, I don't want to say fascination, dependence. No, predatory behavior towards people who were innocent, like more innocent than her, therefore more easy to manipulate, because she seems to have a terrible trauma of abandonment. So it's kind of like her targeting first Roy, what's his name? Her husband. who was 17, she was in the position of power, therefore it was safe for her to manipulate the situation, being more senior, having more experience, to manipulate him into taking whatever narcissistic supply that she needed to take out of him. And then the whole Munchausen by proxy, probably exacerbated by the abandonment trauma because he left her in the end, so she was not that skilled of a manipulator to actually keep him by her side. So she really doubled down on the only person that was totally dependent of her daughter. It kind of like, yeah, that obsessive power control dynamic is becoming very evident here.
Babies, especially newborns, to maybe have some problems with their breathing. But also Dee Dee is a first-time mom. She's going to be over-analysing everything, constantly worried about things. So this right now is not really a problem. So when Gypsy is rushed to the emergency room, the doctors can't find...
Yeah. And then it was somebody calling the emergency service about the horse kicking them in the head, and then the emergency lady said, well, try hitting yourself on the head one more time. And then he did it, and he spoke English again.
Anything wrong with Gypsy. Like, nothing is wrong. However, Dee Dee is convinced that there's something wrong with Gypsy. So she starts telling everybody that Gypsy has sleep apnea. But there is no proof of this. Gypsy was never diagnosed with sleep apnea, but Dee Dee was convinced that her daughter had sleep apnea. She even...
I'm good, thank you. I'm doing a lot better. I had a couple of really rough months, but I changed my diet and suddenly I feel much better. I don't know what it is, but eating carbs made me so fucking tired. And the minute I stopped, I suddenly have energy to do everything, because my biggest obstacle was that I was so tired all of the time. And I'm a lot better now. But yeah, I'm on the straight and narrow to get better. I'm doing a lot better than I was. So yeah. Cigarette omelets. What? What do you mean cigarette omelets? I don't make cigarette omelets. But honestly, another thing that I'm doing now that I'm on a diet is I'm smoking more. But it is what it is. I mean, when I say smoking more, I went from like smoking one cigarette every month to smoking one cigarette every day. Yeah, I've been smoking one a day is my thing.
bought one of those big machines where you put that mask over your face when you're sleeping. I don't quite know how that would look for a newborn baby, but she bought one of those machines, and from that moment on, Gypsy Rose would be hooked up to this machine every single night to apparently help her breathe. So that was the first medical condition that Gypsy had. But then it wasn't too long after this that Dee Dee noticed that Gypsy started to have problems with her eyes. Her eyes weren't focused.
Yeah, like sometimes I smoke, sometimes I don't. Now I smoke a bit more because I'm hungry, so it kind of like, hungry, like, I don't feel as much hunger with this diet I'm doing right now, because it's like, when I was dieting before, I used to have like a meal at 12 and then a meal at 6, and then that was it. But now I have a small breakfast, generally just 2 boiled eggs, and then I have like a yogurt at 2:30, and then I have like a dinner with no carbs, just like meat and veg, or today I had a miso soup for dinner. And actually, like, even though I'm not eating more than I normally eat on a diet, because I split, generally, like, my breakfast was like eggs and like either salad or eggs and the yogurt or something like this. Now I have like eggs at 12, yogurt at 2. But somehow the fact that I split it and I have these 3 meals in that window doesn't make me so hungry anymore. But But yeah, sometimes I get I get craving for chocolate and stuff because I love cookies. My God, I love cookies and I love cake. So, so when I crave cake, I just smoke cigarettes.
Focusing on things. They weren't aligned. So Dee Dee took Gypsy back to the doctors for this eye problem. And this is when Gypsy Rose was diagnosed with a condition called strabismus. And I really hope that that is how you pronounce it, because that is a tongue twister. So strabismus is a condition where one or both of the eyes are not aligned and they're just pointing in different directions, and it can be quite serious if not fixed very early on, because it can eventually lead to complete blindness. And I just want to make this clear that Gypsy Rose Blanchard did have this condition. This was 100% legitimate. This is pretty much the only legitimate condition that Gypsy had. And because this is a serious condition, if it's not fixed, it can lead to blindness. Everyone was concerned about Gypsy. And because people were worried about Gypsy, they were giving Gypsy, and then by extension, Dee Dee, attention and sympathy. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to do whatever they could. So Gypsy went on to have surgery. The surgery went well. The problem with her eyes was fixed, and there was nothing more to worry about. However, it turns out that this one legitimate health condition most likely triggered a dramatic change in Dee Dee. As soon as people...
I think it was already before. To be honest, it seems like it started with the sleep apnea.
Found out that Gypsy did have this serious condition with her eyes. Gypsy and Dee Dee started to get attention and sympathy from pretty much everyone. Family, friends, but even just strangers in the street, because you know what Dee Dee's like. She loves attention, so she would be telling every single person that she could about her daughter's eye condition. And people would feel sorry for Dee Dee. Oh, it must be so hard having a child with that condition. It must be terrible. And Dee Dee loved that. She loved that responsibility of being a parent to a sick child. But then as soon as Gypsy's eyes were fixed, that sympathy and attention went away. So it seems like from that moment on, Dee Dee made the decision that she would make sure that her daughter Gypsy was constantly sick. Because if people thought that Gypsy was sick, they would give Gypsy love, attention, sympathy, and then by extension, they would also give Dee Dee love, attention, and sympathy. And it is thought that this is the point where Dee Dee Blanchard's Munchausen by proxy started to set in for the very first time. So what is Munchausen by proxy? We have talked about Munchausen by proxy a couple of times on this channel, but this is definitely the worst case of Munchausen by proxy I think I've ever seen. So I am sure that there are some of you that know what Munchausen by proxy is, but we're just going to go through it just in case you don't know what it is. So Munchausen syndrome by proxy, also known as MSP, is a psychological disorder where a parent or a caregiver will either exaggerate or make up illnesses for a child or someone in their care. And they do this for attention, sympathy, or monetary gain. And it usually shows up after a child or a person in their care has one legitimate health condition. Just like in this case, Gypsy did have a legitimate condition with her eyes. And then that seems to spark off something in people that suffer from Munchausen by proxy, and then they think, oh, I liked how that felt. I like how people were showing me attention or sympathy, or maybe they were gaining money, and they want to keep on getting.
Yeah, well, Memnock, if you want to find out the details about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the video's playing. Have a listen.
Getting that attention, sympathy, or money. So then they either exaggerate a current illness, or they make up an illness, or in some extreme cases, they will even create illnesses by, for example, poisoning a child or a person in their care. And people suffering with Munchausen by proxy go to extreme lengths to convince others that the person that they're caring for is genuinely sick. They will lie about symptoms, they will alter test results, they will also contaminate urine samples, they will falsify medical records, and they may actually induce reduce the symptoms themselves by doing things like poisoning a person or giving them medication that they don't need, and then that person suffers side effects from that medication. Munchausen by proxy can get really, really bad. But also another huge red flag in people suffering from Munchausen by proxy is that they will visit many doctors, because if a doctor gives them a test result that they don't like, they will just go to another doctor until they find a doctor that will agree with them, that will give them a test result or medication that they want. And we will see all of that in today's case. So now going forward in this case, Gypsy Rose Blanchard grew from a baby into a toddler,
Please don't spoiler the case.
into a child. And along the way, she started to develop a whole host of very serious illnesses. When Gypsy Rose was a toddler, all of a sudden, she developed cancer. Leukemia to be exact, which obviously is very serious, and I just truly don't know how anyone jokes about cancer. But of course, Gypsy didn't have cancer, but Dee Dee was just going around telling everybody that she did. Dee Dee started telling everyone that her little baby, she had leukemia. She's going to have to go through chemotherapy because she's got cancer. And of course, when Dee Dee was going around telling everyone that her daughter had cancer, people were absolutely horrified, which is a very natural response when you find out that a child especially has cancer. So naturally, everyone was giving Gypsy and Dee Dee sympathy, attention, and this is
Yeah, it's really fucked up, but honestly, I would be very careful about phrasing it in a way of like, Didi doing anything about the attention being given to Gypsy, because I think that Didi was only doing things to have the attention for herself, about her being the brave mom with the sick kid, you know, who has to brave the difficulties and unfairness of life because her kid is so sick. So Didi deserves a medal for being this, you know, mother with the heart of gold, Mother Teresa, you know. And I think that it's more about that than like Gypsy getting the attention. Which Gypsy does get the attention too, and which is why there's the whole debate about after Gypsy gets out, what's gonna happen, and there's a very thin line that she has to tread, but let's get there.
exactly what Dee Dee wanted. She even started shaving her daughter's head to make everyone think that she was going through chemotherapy, and she lost her hair through that. So after a while, the shocking news that Gypsy had...
But this is actually, this part, like, Didi constantly shaving Gypsy's hair was one of the points of contention that people brought up during Gypsy's court trial. Well, didn't you know if your hair kept growing back? You know, it's something that people brought up. I don't 100% agree with this argument, and hopefully Gypsy will have an opportunity to explain it later on, but it's something that people got kind of hooked on. So
started to wear off. And as soon as it started to wear off, all of a sudden, Gypsy Rose developed a chromosomal defect that caused all three, asthma, epilepsy, and muscular...
The thing that Didi says to Gypsy is that her hair is growing back like in patches, you know? So Gypsy thought that that was the case, and apparently Didi never let her hair grow long enough for Gypsy to actually realize. So I think that was Gypsy's explanation of why she didn't realize. But people do bring it up as a contention mechanism.
Dystrophy. And muscular dystrophy, just in case if you are not aware, is a condition that gradually over time weakens the muscles, and it can lead to difficulties walking. So again, all three illnesses, very, very serious. And all of a sudden, Gypsy overnight started suffering with them. But what is even worse is that at this point, Didi actually manages to convince some doctors that Gypsy is suffering with these conditions, because obviously you can't convince a doctor that someone is suffering from cancer if they're not. But somehow, epilepsy, asthma, muscular dystrophy, Didi was able to convince some doctors that she had...
The muscular dystrophy is incredible. Like, okay, maybe early stages, but I don't get how any sane doctor could believe that a child who doesn't have muscular dystrophy had. But okay, she was very thin. Apparently, she was very frail. Maybe I don't know. It's a bit sus. It's a bit sus.
This, and therefore doctors prescribed Dee Dee medication to give to Gypsy for these conditions. And then now Dee Dee was rubbing her hands together because she would, wouldn't she? She's actually convinced doctors that her daughter is suffering with conditions that she doesn't have. And now that she has her hands on medication, these cause a whole load of side effects to Gypsy. This medication would make Gypsy drowsy. She started having trouble balancing, walking. And these side effects did make other people believe that Gypsy genuinely did have these conditions. Gypsy now had the appearance of a very sick child. And this is exactly what Dee Dee planned. And she was getting away with it. I think that is the craziest thing when it comes to this case, is that Dee Dee...
My opinion on the topic is no one realized because of Katrina.
Got away with all of this for so long, and we have only just scratched the surface of what Dee Dee does. And then finally, Dee Dee had one more...
Oh yeah, of course. She got prescribed a lot of medication. A lot.
Or trick up her sleeve. I mean, she has many more tricks up her sleeve, but for right now, one more thing that she wants to do to make her daughter Gypsy look like the ultimate sick patient, to allow her to have more control over her daughter. And that was, she wanted Gypsy in a wheelchair. But Dee Dee, she bided her time. She knew that she needed to go about this in the right way. She wanted to come up with a plan that was plausible. And then one day, fate seemed to work out for her. And Dee Dee was handed the perfect excuse of why Gypsy all of a sudden ended up in a wheelchair. Because one day, roughly 6-year-old Gypsy Rose got into a motorbike accident with her granddad. Now, this was not a serious accident.
I love how she's a cancer-stricken child with muscular dystrophy and all these other illnesses and epilepsy and shit, but she's riding motorcycles.
But then it's still a motorbike accident, so it still was serious, but it wasn't serious at the same time, if you know what I mean. Gypsy only had a few scrapes on her leg, like a little bit of a cut. It wasn't a big deal at all. But as soon as Dee Dee found out that Gypsy had been in a motorbike accident, she completely blew it out of proportion. She started saying things like, "Oh, Gypsy, look at how damaged your leg is." And Dee Dee wrapped Gypsy's leg up in a complete bandage. Like, I'm talking full-on leg bandage. And I just want to stress again that Gypsy did not need this. And then the very next day, Dee Dee returned home with a wheelchair. And she told Gypsy that she would need to use a wheelchair until her leg healed. But that's the thing. Gypsy would now never leave this wheelchair. The weeks passed and Gypsy would ask her mom, "Is my leg healed enough now? Can I get up? Can I walk? I don't need the wheelchair anymore." Because even though Gypsy is only 6 years old, she knows that she can walk and it's all perfectly fine. But Dee Dee is like, no, you have to be in the wheelchair. Your leg is still damaged. And if you walk on your leg, you may do more damage. So no, you need to stay in the wheelchair. And Dee Dee just kept coming up with more and more excuses of why Gypsy needed to stay in the wheelchair. And she would also say that Gypsy's muscular dystrophy was making the leg injury worse. And Gypsy is absolutely devastated. She just doesn't understand why she has to stay in a wheelchair, because she knows that she can walk. In fact, one day, Gypsy and Dee Dee were at a family party, and the children there, they were running around, going on the trampoline. And when Dee Dee's back was turned, Gypsy got out of her wheelchair and walked and got on the trampoline and started bouncing around with the other children, having the time of her life. And the whole family was so shocked because they were like, "Oh my God, it's a miracle." But then as soon as Dee Dee saw, she flew off the handle. She started screaming at Gypsy to get off the trampoline, to get back into the wheelchair, otherwise she's going to damage her leg even more. And Gypsy was scared of her mum. So from this moment on, Gypsy's extended family...
Imagine, because I imagine like a typical like deep South United States family, you know, like there's this child in the wheelchair, the children are playing, it's hot outside, and she just gets up from her wheelchair and starts bouncing on the freaking trampoline, and the family is just like, praise the Lord. And this is why you need to educate people.
Never saw Gypsy get out of her wheelchair ever again. Speechless, I truly am. There's going to be so many times in this case where I'm completely and utterly speechless. Because Gypsy, she's now approaching 7 years old and she is still in a wheelchair when she doesn't need to be. And it must have been so hard. It's just truly heartbreaking thinking about Gypsy as a 7-year-old girl stuck in a wheelchair when she doesn't need to be, and watching other children run around and play and just be children. And Gypsy can't do that, even though she is physically able to. But also, Gypsy is incredibly confused because Dee Dee keeps telling her that she's incredibly sick. Gypsy has no other choice but to accept what her mom is telling her. And that is what makes this case 100 times worse, is that Gypsy, from the moment she's born pretty much, is being brainwashed by her mom. She's so confused. She doesn't know what is true, what is real, how she feels. And at only 7 years old, she lacks the understanding to question what her mom is doing to her. At 7 years old, she wouldn't think that her mom is intentionally making her ill. She just trusts her mom. And one thing that really frustrates me about this case is that Dee Dee was just getting away with this. She was fooling every single person around her. I mean, that's not technically true. There were some people that were suspicious of her, but overall, she was fooling everybody around her. And how was she able to get away with this? Well, Dee Dee had a few tricks up her.
Actually, I have something World of Warcraft related. Is Raven in the chat? If the Raven is here, flock your wings.
Sleeve there as well, because something that allows.
And Ima, first to answer your question, that's exactly my point. Like, the family saw the signs, so I low-key blame the family, although I don't know, it's like, from what I've seen in the documentary, it's the kind of people that it's a bit like, yeah, they should have reacted, but I don't know if they are the kind of people who would react. And that's the saddest part of it. They should have, but they didn't. I don't blame the father all that much, though. There's a whole thing about the dad, and honestly, I feel like the dad is the only good part of Gypsy's life. But Dee Dee was such a skilled manipulator at, like, manipulating him out, and also you have to take into account that he was significantly younger and basically a victim of Dee Dee himself. And when the father started noticing that some of these trees weren't adding up and mentioned it to Dee Dee, then Dee Dee started restricting his contact. They moved out like really far away. And he was afraid to push it further because he wanted to be in touch with his daughter, and he knew that Dee Dee would just completely cut ties with him and not allow Gypsy to see him if that was the case. I think he should have taken it to court, but whatever. And Raven, I have an idea. You know the way how we were discussing the possibility of there being a Warcraft 2? You know what Warcraft 2, in my opinion, what would be a good idea, perhaps, of setting Warcraft 2 as? If they wanted to go down the route of finish the content of World of Warcraft by with the Soul Saga thingy. If they wanted to re-release the content or change things around and do World of Warcraft 2, and then like re-release stuff maybe in a better order, rewrite a couple of things, they could start with Warcraft 1. They could literally like revive World of Warcraft at the events of the first war between humans and orcs, and then build on that, because like by the time that Warcraft 3 comes out, you have enough lore that people are already nostalgic about everything in the World of Warcraft, and then you slowly re-release everything. Right? I had this idea the other day when I was researching the lore. I was like, if they made World of Warcraft 2, they should start at the first war. But it would be a re-release. I mean, it would offer them opportunity to fix things like Draenor and Shadowlands. Anyways, back to Gypsy Rose. Yeah, they did, but they could like rebuild the entire world with like amazing graphics, you know, remodel everything and start again with that very like solid core of the story, and fix the things that they did wrong, rewrite the things that didn't make sense, you know. Okay, that could be cool as well, yeah. Or the War of the Ancients. But then I feel like the War of the Ancients, the only problem is that you don't end up getting all the races. And that kind of sucks. You know? Although, like, unless they develop on the story of the War of the Ancients, they added the Pandaren in there. You know, I don't know how the Draenei could... I don't think the Draenei would be a part of that. No. But... they could add the Pandaren because the world was whole, so the Pandaren had to be there somehow, right? So that would be something that they could develop upon. Yeah, but it would be a completely different world. It would still be Warcraft, but it would not be Azeroth. Yeah. Oh, it's like we could move maybe to, I don't know, Eonar's planet. But then, like, it would take away a lot of the narrative that was being said about Azeroth being special with all these different races that live upon it, you know, because there was a strong sense in the narrative that Azeroth was special because it had this vibrant life. I don't know if... And also, I don't know, what kind of characters they could design other than the ones that they've already designed. And I don't know how it would sit story-wise. Depends what they're gonna do with the Titans.
Dee Dee to easily fool people about her daughter's health was the fact that Dee Dee was a medical professional. She had a job in the healthcare industry. She was actually trained to be a nurse's assistant. For the most part, people believed that Dee Dee knew what she was talking about because she had a better knowledge of healthcare, the medical industry, symptoms, medication than the average person. Dee Dee was also incredibly comfortable in hospitals, in doctors' offices. She was familiar with terminology.
She was the OG fake it till you make it girly. And in the worst sense imaginable.
Very complex words that people like me can't pronounce. She was able to accurately describe symptoms that apparently Gypsy was having so doctors would believe her. And then on top of all of this, Dee Dee took a page right out of the Munchausen by proxy playbook. Whenever a doctor did get suspicious, she would just move on to the next doctor. I actually don't know how many different doctors Dee Dee visited. I don't know if anyone truly knows how many she visited, but it would have been a lot. And also, if a particular doctor didn't give her the answer that she was looking for, a particular diagnosis, for example, again, she would just move on to the next doctor. But then there was another huge huge red flag, and that was that Dee Dee pulled Gypsy out of school, which, oh my God, is a red flag if I've ever seen one. Dee Dee apparently pulled Gypsy out of school because she didn't trust that the school would administer the right medication at the right time, which obviously, I mean, I'm sure the school would have done if they needed to, but Gypsy didn't even need medication. So that's the true reason why she pulled Gypsy out of school. But without Gypsy going to school, there was no prying eyes, there was no suspicion. But there was also another benefit of pulling Gypsy out of school. So she pulled Gypsy out of school at around the 2nd grade, and Dee Dee claimed that she was going to homeschool Gypsy. However, she never did. And because of this, Gypsy fell majorly behind her educational development to her peers. She also failed to develop social skills. And this then did 2 things. Number 1, it limited Gypsy's understanding of the world. So in turn, it would stop Gypsy questioning her mom's behavior. But then the other benefit of pulling Gypsy out of school was because Gypsy fell behind in her educational development, it gave Gypsy the appearance of slow mental development, which again gave the impression that Gypsy was sicker than she was. And then finally, to really have ultimate control over Gypsy, she started to isolate Gypsy from the world and from people more and more. And she did this because she didn't want people questioning whether her daughter was genuinely sick or not. And Dee Dee isolated Gypsy from pretty much...
Yeah, and also this whole thing about the delayed development and pulling her out of school, limiting her education and making her seem, appear, sound, and present herself as much less developed than her peers, gave Dee Dee the ability later on to lie about Gypsy's age. Even to Gypsy herself. Gypsy didn't really know what her age really was.
Everyone, and this included Gypsy's dad, Rod, which we haven't really spoken about because it was kind of hard to fit everything into this story, so I feel like I'm just going to talk about Rod here. So remember Rod, the 17-year-old boy that Dee Dee took advantage of? So even though they're now divorced, they are no longer together, Rod still wanted to be in his daughter's life. And he did the best that he could to visit Gypsy as much as he possibly could. But his job did require him to be away a lot, and Dee Dee definitely took advantage of that. However, Dee Dee was lying to Rod because obviously Rod was under the impression that his daughter was incredibly sick. He genuinely did think that his daughter had cancer, she has epilepsy, asthma, muscular dystrophy, that she was now in a wheelchair, that she had these eye problems. And he believed everything that Dee Dee was telling him because why wouldn't he believe her? He had no reason.
Yeah, also they lived apart, and then the minute he started getting a little bit suspicious, Dee Dee would move farther away, and then farther away, and even farther away, and trying to restrict his access to Gypsy as much as possible.
To not trust Dee Dee. Dee Dee was also a medical professional, and who in their right mind, at least at this point, because Gypsy's only about 7 years older.
The one thing that Danielle Kirsty doesn't mention here is the fact that Didi apparently Gypsy wasn't the first victim of Didi. I heard this story somewhere that Didi was taking care of an elderly grandma or her mom or something like this, and that there was a mysterious passing associated. Like the person was sick or elderly or something like this, and under the care of Didi. That's why she had her like nurse. Like she did some qualification or something like that. Like she was a nurse. She could nurse people. And there was a mysterious passing. I think Bailey Sarian mentioned this.
This point, who in their right mind would think that a parent is intentionally making up or making their child sick. Like, no one would want to think like that. So Rod would visit Gypsy as much as he could. He would also send $1,200 every single month in child support. And Rod and Gypsy were very close when Gypsy was young. But then as Gypsy was getting older, Dee Dee started to fill Gypsy's head with a load of BS. Dee Dee started telling Gypsy that her dad was a waste of space, that he didn't love Gypsy, that Rod had always wanted a son, but he had a daughter instead, that he was an abuser, that he didn't really want to see Gypsy, and she even told Gypsy that when Gypsy was a baby, her dad abused her. And because of this, Gypsy grew up resenting her dad, having a lot of anger inside towards her dad. Over time, slowly, Dee Dee essentially just cut off all contact. She would always make excuses of why Rod couldn't see his daughter. And because Gypsy resented her dad, Gypsy didn't really care about seeing her dad either. So now we jump forward to when Gypsy is 9 years old. Gypsy and Dee Dee are still living with Dee Dee's parents, or Gypsy's grandparents. And yes, that is the dad that sexually abused Dee Dee as a child. Yeah, those parents. And a few things happen around the time Gypsy is 9 years old in very quick succession. So if you remember, Dee Dee's mom, Emma, I said that Dee Dee was her mom's favourite, that she possibly was a victim of Munchausen by proxy herself. So Dee Dee's mom, Emma, suddenly passed away. And Dee Dee was absolutely devastated because her mom was everything to her. She was filled with grief, but for Dee Dee, it was slightly different because her mom had smothered her and showed her so much attention her whole life that she didn't quite know how to cope without the constant praise and attention that her mom would give her. So after her mom died, Dee Dee went off the rails a bit. Her dad, Claude, the sexual abuser, he also instantly remarried, which also affected Dee Dee because she felt like her mom had just been replaced. So Dee Dee and Gypsy moved out of the house for a little while and they were kind of bouncing around different places, just not really settled. At one point as well, there was also a warrant out for Dee Dee's arrest for signing bad checks. There was just a lot of chaos going on, and later down the line, people also suspected that Dee Dee may have contributed to her mom's death. I know, it's like, oh my god, this is so confusing. So apparently, in the end of her life, she was a bit sick, and Dee Dee, being the medical professional, was caring for her mom. But apparently, there were suspicions that Dee Dee was withholding food from her mom, which then contributed to her.
Okay, that's what she's mentioning here. Okay, she does mention it. Sorry, Danielle, you did mention it. I'm getting ahead of you. Good research, girly pop.
Death. So yeah, there are definitely some accusations and suspicions around Dee Dee possibly having a hand in her mom's death. I don't know how true it is because it's only accusations.
Yeah. It's something that the family were speculating about, and like, not to be too judgmental, but the family is a little bit simple. Like simple in this way, like, you know, these like country people who maybe not had the best access to education, not had the best opportunities. You know, it is what it is. But that's something that they've mentioned in the documentary. But it sounded a lot like just like this family mystery, but really there's no way to confirm it. It would be ironic, yeah.
Being honest and giving my opinion, I don't know if this is true. I'm not saying that Dee Dee is not capable of that. Just given...
No, she's 100% capable of that. But just the way that the family are, from what I've seen in the documentary, I was a bit like... I know people like this. I know I'm making big estimations, but... Yeah, you have to see it to believe it.
Personality, she craves attention and affection, and that is what her mom was giving to her. So why would she potentially get rid of that? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, but who knows? I don't know. But anyway, because now she's lost her mom and she's lost that source of attention that she was getting, it's almost like an addiction to Dee Dee. She has an attention addiction. She now needed to get same amount of attention elsewhere. And I think we all know where this is going. So she basically now directed 100% of her attention on Gypsy. and making Gypsy sicker and sicker and getting more and more attention. And I'm really sorry if this is confusing, because this case, it seems quite straightforward, but it's anything but. I thought that this case would be pretty straightforward to research, but it wasn't. And then there is another really significant thing that happens in Gypsy's life when she is 9 years old, and that is that her grandfather, Claude, would start to sexually abuse her. I know, it's like, can this get any worse for Gypsy? So Claude, as we know, he sexually abused his own daughter Dee Dee when she was a child. And now he was about to do the exact same thing to Gypsy. So in some point in early 2001, Dee Dee was involved in a very serious car accident. She suffered a terrible injury to her leg and she had to stay in hospital for 2 months. So because Dee Dee was in hospital for 2 months, this now meant that Gypsy was put in the sole care of her grandfather, Claude. So whilst Gypsy is in the care of her grandfather and her new step-grandmother, who is a woman called Laura, whilst Gypsy is in their care, she never gets out of her wheel.
About World of Warcraft, I have to say, Raven, I've healed as a druid and I've healed as a shaman, and I have to say, I absolutely fucking love healing as a shaman. Shaman healing is so fun. Fun. It's relaxing. Like, I don't think I will ever prioritize being a healer, but I'm enjoying it.
Chair because she has been so brainwashed by her mom to never get out of her wheelchair. But every single day, Claude would take Gypsy,
because druid healing was a bit overwhelming, I have to say,
out to his workshop, which was that separate building away from the main house. Once inside, he would take Gypsy out of her wheelchair, undress her before performing sexual acts on her. And this poor girl, she has already been through so much. She is only 9 years old and she is now being sexually abused by her own grandfather. And her grandfather, Claude, also makes 9-year-old Gypsy touch him inappropriately. No. And if your blood is not boiling yet, oh my god, it will in a minute. So
not safe
the new
for
documentary
school
that has
content,
just been released about the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, Claude, the grandfather, is actually on that documentary. And he is confronted with Gypsy's accusations that he sexually abused her when she was a child. And oh my god, his response, oh my god, I'm so angry. His response was, quote, "No, I never. That's not true at all. Gypsy was actually the one that would try and touch me." Do I need to give...
He said that. He actually said that. I saw the documentary. He did say that. And just the way he says it, like, he's so smug about it. He's like... He's very Southern, and he's downplaying it a whole lot. He's like... He's basically like, no, you know how kids are, but actually she'd be running around and she's trying to come to me, and I would tell her, no, Gypsy, you can't do that. It sounds so guilty. So guilty. I have never heard anyone sound more guilty than this motherfucker. See the documentary.
You a moment. Oh my god. He is blaming Gypsy for touching him and a 9-year-old girl. Are you being serious?
He did.
Is he now trying to say that a child was sexually abusing him? Oh my god, I can't. And he went on to say,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's
old,
ridiculous.
Gypsy would try and touch his genitals. And I'm like, oh my god. No, that is not what we're going to do. And he also went on to say that if anyone was touching anyone inappropriately, it was Gypsy, the child, trying to touch him, the adult, inappropriately. Yeah. Have you ever heard of such nonsense? I bet your blood is boiling.
It is.
Mine too. So anyway, back to the story. Dee Dee is obviously in hospital recovering from the car accident, and when she gets out of hospital, ironically, Dee Dee also needs a wheelchair. So,
Ima, need a new brain already? Have I ruined your psyche enough?
Dee Dee needs looking after as well. So Dee Dee goes back and lives with her dad and her new stepmom, Laura. And then, oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to say this next thing. Claude would now sexually abuse his own daughter as well. You heard that right. Claude now starts to sexually abuse his 33-year-old daughter Dee Dee again, as well as sexually abusing her daughter Gypsy when she's only 9 years old. I just truly, again, speechless about this case. Claude would also make all three of them, himself, Dee Dee and Gypsy, take baths together every single night. And Gypsy never said a word about the sexual abuse. Her mom, Dee Dee, never knew about the sexual abuse. I mean, obviously they were taking baths together, but other than that, Dee Dee didn't know that Gypsy was being abused. And as soon as Dee Dee became well enough to look after herself again, she became so angry at her dad. She was sick and tired of living with him. And she was also angry at her new stepmom, Laura, because she felt like she had just replaced her mom. So this is when Dee Dee started to lace Laura's food with poison every single night. She's trying to now kill her stepmom.
Sorry, I was laughing at World of Warcraft. Pardon me. I know that sometimes my reactions may be out of touch. Sorry.
Whilst the poison didn't have a huge effect on Laura at the time, it's said that years later she would actually die a very slow and painful death. And it is thought that this may have occurred because of Dee Dee's poisoning all those years prior. So again, that is just suspicion that has not been proven, but we do know that Dee Dee was poisoning her food. So you put two and two together, I don't know. So following the sexual abuse and poisoning, Dee Dee just decides to skip town altogether. She had had enough of being around family. She had had enough being around people with prying eyes, questioning her daughter's illnesses. So she ran away. And this is when Gypsy and Dee Dee moved approximately 2 hours north to the city of Slidell, Louisiana. And whilst living in Slidell, Gypsy would now grow from 10 years old to 14 years old. So they're there for 4 years. And now, because Gypsy and Dee Dee are isolated from all family, friends, anybody that previously knew them, I'm sure you can guess what happened. Gypsy's so-called illnesses started to pile up more and more. So far, Gypsy had cancer or was still suffering with cancer. Honestly, it's hard to keep up with Dee Dee's lies, but Gypsy had cancer, asthma, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy, she was in a wheelchair, and there was a few other little issues. So because of all of this, Dee Dee already had a lot of control over her daughter, but it wasn't enough. She wanted more control over her daughter. And she thought to herself, how am I going to have even more control over
Yeah, no, the whole family is rotten, really.
my daughter?
Well, except for the dad. Honestly, I know men in this day and age are a bit of a gobshites. Most of them are gobshites. But I found from just the documentaries, the interviews and stuff, Rod to be okay. Like, he could have done more. He really could have done more. But I don't want to say I have a soft spot for him, but just I understand a bit more because he was so young. He was coerced by Dee Dee. He was a victim as well. He loved his child. He was afraid to fight that battle with this highly manipulative, predatory woman, which he should have done because he was Gypsy's father, but he was so young that I can sort of see how that would be more challenging than normal, which is why I have the empathy for the dad in this case, because like he absolutely should have done more. It's just I do think that there are certain mitigating factors to not be like too upset about him, you know, because he was a victim himself. So
I know. I'm going to control her food. So this is when Dee Dee decided to take away Gypsy's ability to eat food. And we
Another cherry to this fucking shit cake. Hell yeah, why not?
We all know that food is a huge factor in having control over somebody. We see this all the time in cases where, for example, a kidnapper will starve their victim to make them weak, to make them docile, to make them compliant. So Dee Dee comes up with a new illness that Gypsy has, and that is that Gypsy has a phobia of eating. And this is actually a legitimate phobia. It is called cyberphobia. Cyberphobia? I don't know if that is how you pronounce it, but it is a legitimate phobia. But Gypsy doesn't have this phobia. But anyway, that doesn't matter to Dee Dee, does it? So Dee Dee, she goes into the doctor's office and she starts saying, my daughter, she has this phobia of food. She won't eat and she's not taking in enough calories through the mouth. What can I do? I think we need a feeding tube.
Imagine the amount of procedures and unnecessary surgeries like Memnock mentioned before. Now, Memnock, let's talk about unnecessary surgeries. I didn't mention it because I wanted Danielle to have the shock factor, but imagine. How could you make... That's why I'm saying that there was no brain cell in Dee Dee's brain responsible for thinking or being concerned about attention being given to Gypsy whatsoever. It was all about the attention that was going towards Dee Dee. Dee Dee had not an ounce of love or care inside of herself. She was a manipulating narcissist and nothing more than that.
Inserted into her stomach so I can just feed her whenever she needs to be. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, doesn't it, when it's coming out of my mouth like that? But that is literally what Dee Dee would do. She would say all of this BS to these doctors, and for some strange reason, doctors seem to believe her. Doctors now agreed and recommended that Gypsy undergo surgery to have a tube inserted into her stomach that would now give Dee Dee the ability to feed Gypsy through that tube directly into her stomach whenever she needed to. And I am, again, utterly shocked. How the hell
these people?
did doctors just say, okay,
Oh
yeah,
God.
we'll put a feeding tube into your daughter. That's perfectly fine. And I assume that Dee Dee went with the story of, my daughter has a phobia. Because you can't really prove if someone has a phobia or not, can you? I don't know, maybe you can. And because Gypsy is so brainwashed and she is so scared of her mom, she has been coached very well by her mom, Gypsy just goes along with it in the doctor's office. She probably agreed and said, yes, I have this phobia. But I'm just so frustrated. Like, how the hell did this happen? Like, truly, how has this little girl undergone surgery now?
Medical malpractice, that's how it happened.
I just feel like if someone has a phobia of food, maybe they need therapy. Maybe there is other ways that you can work through that phobia without going to the drastic measure of getting a tube inserted into their stomach. But that's just me. Dee Dee now had complete control over Gypsy's food intake. Dee Dee also fed Gypsy a BS story that she could no longer eat food through the mouth. Again, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that Dee Dee told Gypsy that she had allergies to certain foods and it was just too dangerous for her to eat. And again, Gypsy is only a child. She trusts her mom, so what else is she supposed to do? At every single opportunity, Dee Dee is brainwashing her daughter. And from this point forward, Gypsy would only be fed liquid foods through the tube in her stomach. But this tube didn't allow Dee Dee to just control the food that Gypsy was having. It also gave her the ability to control how much medication Gypsy was having. Because yes, Dee Dee would also administer medication through her feeding tube, and Gypsy was none the wiser. And Dee Dee would give Gypsy very powerful sedatives. So now Gypsy is incredibly docile. She's completely spaced out a lot of the time, completely and utterly under her mom's control. And whilst living in Slidell, this is the first time that Dee Dee started to take advantage of Gypsy's illnesses for her own monetary gain. She told the state that she could no longer work because she had to care for her daughter 24/7 24/7, so Dee Dee qualified for Social Security and disability payments. She also got Medicare to pay for her medication, and she was still getting the $1,200 from Gypsy's dad, Rod, every single month. And when Dee Dee realized how profitable it was to have a sick child, illnesses just kept piling up. Dee Dee went to the doctors and said that Gypsy was having seizures every other month, which of course was a lie. But regardless, doctors put Gypsy on anti-seizure medication, which had very bad side effects for Gypsy. Dee Dee would also make up that there was constant problems with Gypsy's eyes and ears, when actually Dee Dee would insert foreign objects into her daughter's ears to damage them, so then doctors could see the damage and then they would operate on Gypsy's ears. Gypsy was also forced to wear glasses when her eyesight was completely fine. On top of this, Dee Dee started to say to doctors that her daughter Gypsy was suffering with cerebral palsy, which I'm just like, how can you even fake that? Of course, doctors ran tests on Gypsy, and every single test that was done on Gypsy came back negative. She did not have cerebral palsy, but whenever Dee Dee was told this, she would just find a new doctor. But even still, that doctor would also say, your daughter doesn't have cerebral palsy. But it turns out that a symptom of cerebral palsy is excessive drooling. So Dee Dee thought, I know how to trick people into thinking that she has cerebral palsy. So Dee Dee got a numbing gel and inserted it into her daughter's mouth so Gypsy would start to drool a lot. So then when she took Gypsy back to the doctors and was like, look, she's drooling all the time. What are we going to do about this? Doctors decided to operate on Gypsy to remove her salivary glands. And again, I'm just like,
Imagine.
what? How is it that she has undergone so many surgeries for no reason? And your salivary glands are very important, obviously, and there are side effects to having them removed, like tooth loss, which Gypsy had. Gypsy's teeth started to rot and fall out, and in the end, Gypsy only had 16 teeth left, which is half of what you should have. And Gypsy was just constantly in the hospital, like truly constantly. Her mom would take her to the emergency room for something as simple as a cough or a cold. But around this time, doctors had started to become suspicious of Dee Dee, especially because Gypsy, whenever they ran tests, she seemed completely fine. She didn't seem to have any of the illnesses that her mum claimed that she had. And what many doctors were trying to do is that they were trying to figure out why Gypsy couldn't walk. Dee Dee was saying that it was her muscular dystrophy and blah, blah, blah. But doctors couldn't really see any evidence that Gypsy even had muscular dystrophy. I mean, just by looking at Gypsy, yes, she's in a wheelchair. Yes, she looks sick. However, tests don't lie. She had MRI scans. They took samples of her muscles to run tests on, and everything came back completely fine. The doctor literally extracted samples of Gypsy's muscle, which I don't know, but I can imagine that would not have been very comfortable. Ran tests on it to see, does she have muscular dystrophy? What is going on here? Why can't she walk? But those tests also came back completely clear. And when a doctor point blank said to Dee Dee, Gypsy does not have muscular dystrophy, Dee Dee literally threw a tantrum, told the doctor that they were lying, and just went out and found another doctor. And it's not quite clear when this happened, but at one point Dee Dee also stole a prescriptions pad, which is basically a notebook of all the prescriptions that doctors write your prescription on and then rip it off and give it to you. Or they use a computer now, don't they? Get in the 21st century, Danielle, but you know what I mean. She stole one of those pads, which gave her the ability to write her own prescriptions, and she would just forge the doctor's signature. So even if a doctor wouldn't prescribe her the medication that she wanted, she would just write a prescription herself anyway, which is crazy, truly crazy.
Yeah.
And this went on over and over again. Gypsy spent more.
Yeah, this is exactly the problem in America. Like, they're so afraid of socialism that they don't have a universal system for healthcare. Therefore, there's no exchange of information between different doctors. There is no centralized register of prescriptions, people's conditions. So basically, you literally go with the prescription to the pharmacy and they give you whatever you want. Because there's no system for it. Like in Poland, we have all prescriptions are associated to your national ID. Yeah, no, it makes no sense at all. Like, at all. This is America for you. Like, America wants their citizens dead. Or, no, not dead. They want them sick so that they would pay a lot of money for medications. Capitalism, baby.
Time in the hospital than she probably did at home. And this is when one doctor started to suspect that Dee Dee had Munchausen by proxy and that she may also be abusing her daughter Gypsy. So the doctor reported Gypsy to CPS. CPS went out to investigate. They went over and questioned Dee Dee. They also went over and questioned Gypsy. But because Gypsy is so well controlled and brainwashed and coached by her mom, Gypsy told CPS that everything was fine. And Dee Dee, to the outside world, if you didn't know what she was doing, she looked like a very caring mother. So CPS thought that there was nothing wrong and closed the case with no further investigation. And from this point going forward, no doctor would report Dee Dee or Gypsy to any authority. They may have had suspicions, but they...
That's exactly what they're thinking. Am I done? I'm done. Okay. And that's in my opinion the biggest problem with America is like there's a lot of fear about labels. Everyone's afraid of labels, like socialism, without even thinking or defining what socialism means. They all like to throw these big, scary keywords around without defining what they actually mean. And they make a whole fucking drama about it. But when you really think about it, what the right-wing Americans are trying to achieve today is basically a dictatorship. Because the reason it seems that they are so against Democrats who believe in democracy is because if you really break it down, democracy is the will and the vote and the voice of the people. What is the voice of the people for the people of the people? You know, democracy is, I think, inherently communal and socialist. And I feel like that's why America is having a brief marriage with fascism right now. Hopefully it's brief. Honestly, what I'm hoping for is a leftist Trump right now. America could use a leftist extremist as a president. Next election. Let's hope.
They never reported them. Police never investigated. CPS just didn't care. Gypsy truly slipped through the cracks. Gypsy was completely and utterly let down by authorities. Because it's not like Dee Dee is hiding in plain sight. Let's be realistic. Dee Dee is out and about screaming from the rooftops that her daughter is sick. How is it that nothing was ever done? And now we get to 2005. Gypsy is now 14 years old, and we now get to another significant chapter of her life, where her life was about to be turned upside down, and it would be because of Hurricane Katrina. In the summer of 2000,
this is why I think that this case has gone on to the extreme that it has, and for as long as it did, is because of Katrina. Because it seemed like people were already catching on to Dee Dee's lies, but then Katrina happens, and sadly, all the documentation that did exist outside of the database, because there's no database, all the documentation that actually did exist got destroyed.
and 5, Dee Dee and Gypsy were still living in Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina hit, and it completely devastated the community that they were living in, as well as a lot of other communities. And during Hurricane Katrina, Dee Dee and Gypsy were forced to move into a shelter for about a month and a half before they were able to return to their home. But then when they returned home, there was pretty much nothing left. It had completely been destroyed. They were only able to recover a few of their belongings, and they needed a new place to live. And this is when Dee Dee started to take advantage of her daughter even more.
Oh, yeah.
Because after Hurricane Katrina, news reporters descended on the area trying to get stories, trying to report on the devastation, what people's lives were like after the hurricane. And this is when Dee Dee essentially shoved her daughter in front of the cameras, literally saying, look at me, I have an incredibly sick child. She has leukemia, asthma, epilepsy. She's got to be in a wheelchair all the time and we have nothing left. She was basically playing the victim card. She was like, poor me, look at me. But she was also saying more lies to try and get even more attention. She started saying that her daughter had a very short life expectancy, and it worked. Because of course it did. To the outside world, this was a horrible, devastating story. No one wants to see anyone homeless, especially an incredibly sick child. So Gypsy ended up in newspapers. She started appearing all over the place. She almost became a little mini celebrity. And Dee Dee was absolutely loving this. And then following this, a lot of charities started to get involved. A lot of people...
I don't think she made it till COVID era.
Picked up on this absolutely devastating story of Dee Dee and Gypsy. So charities started...
Not to say anything, but that lady from the picture looked a little bit like Ghislaine Maxwell.
sending
that would be a crazy lore crossover.
Dee Dee and Gypsy to Disney.
I'm laughing
to
because
trips
the world
here, there,
is
and everywhere,
fucked.
paying for flights, paying for accommodation. Dee Dee and Gypsy were attending events left, right, and centre. In fact, charities started even paying for Dee Dee and Gypsy's accommodation, like permanently, because they had nowhere to live. And they moved to a few houses, but their rent was always paid by these charities. And then one charity even offered to build Dee Dee and Gypsy their very own home for free. And this home would be customed for Gypsy and her needs. It would have a wheelchair ramp, it would have a hot tub so Gypsy could get in there and relax her muscles because, you know, she has muscular dystrophy. And it makes my blood boil that Dee Dee is taking money from these charities, and this money could be going to other children in need. It's like, does this woman have no
They built her a goddamn house.
And over the next couple of years, as their home was being built, Dee Dee and Gypsy continued on attending charity events. And
My dream is to have a house. Wait. I think it's too late for that hustle.
Gypsy became kind of like a role model in the community. Dee Dee would always dress Gypsy up in princess dresses to make her look as young as possible, but also as cute as possible. She would always train Gypsy to act in a very childlike way, speak in a very, very high-pitched voice. She would always encourage Gypsy to act a lot younger than she was. She was still shaving Gypsy's head because, you know, Gypsy has leukemia, and it all worked. The more events Gypsy went to, the more popular she became, the more attention Dee Dee started to get. Because Dee Dee was getting so much attention, everyone thought that she was an angel on this earth, that she had sacrificed so much to take care of her sick child, that she was an absolutely incredible, selfless mom. In the end, Gypsy went to a charity event and even won Child of the Year. On another occasion, Gypsy was at a charity event and she was singing on stage, and this was for the American Cancer Society.
I believe there are angels among us, sent down to us from some.
There was something that Dee Dee had a part of Gypsy's vocal cords removed, or something. She had some sort of procedure done for her to make her voice more high pitched, so she sounds younger and more sickly.
Wherever they come to you and me in our darkest hour.
I don't think I can emphasize enough in this video how many people Dee Dee fooled that Gypsy was this incredibly sick child that had all of these illnesses. I cannot stress that enough. But anyway, after a couple of years...
Which, honestly, like, the thing with Gypsy's high-pitched voice, after her 8-year-long sentence in prison, where she spent time socializing with prison people, she developed a little bit of a slang, like a prison slang. So now imagine this girl with this super high-pitched voice sounding like a prison Latina. It's a sight to be beholden.
Years of moving to various different houses, rent being paid for by charities, their new home built for them is finally finished. And this is when Dee Dee and Gypsy moved to Springfield, Missouri. So they are now in a completely different state, further isolating Gypsy from anyone that she has ever known. So Dee Dee and Gypsy settle into their new neighborhood, and Dee Dee was probably rubbing her hands together because now she gets a new audience for her show, her sick and twisted show that she is putting on, that her daughter is sick. Because once again, when they move into their new neighborhood, they are getting so much attention. Oh, I forgot to say that the house that was built for them is pink, by the way, because that is Gypsy's favourite colour. And to be honest, I don't even know if pink is Gypsy's favourite colour, or was it just Dee Dee's favourite colour? I don't really know, but anyway, the house is pink. So they move into this new house, they're getting a lot of sympathy and attention from the neighbours. Everyone felt so sorry for Gypsy, and then by extension, Dee Dee. A local news crew actually turned up at the home to interview Gypsy and Dee Dee about the whole experience of the house being built for them and just everything. And in the clip, Gypsy is acting very childlike. She has a very high voice and she's saying how lucky she is that she now has the house that she has always wanted, that she loves her mom. Her mom is her best friend.
It's so easy to live here and it's so peaceful.
I remember my mom had gave me this little glass house, and she said, one day this will be real. And now
You see how she's holding her hand? There was a whole thing about master manipulators controlling their victims by always presenting themselves by like always having their hand on them, either on their shoulder or on their hand or on their arm. And later on, Gypsy would, I think, confirm that when Gypsy would say something that they didn't like, she would just give her a little squeeze. So it's almost like Gypsy becomes this puppet that Dee Dee is puppeteering, you know, with malicious intents and mastering the narrative for her to say.
finally is, it just proves that happy endings are not just in fairy tales, they're real.
And in the interview, you can see that Dee Dee is holding on to Gypsy's hand.
Yeah.
And that is actually something that Dee Dee does all the time.
I feel like I always get ahead of myself. I say the thing and then Danielle says the thing 5 minutes later.
Whenever Gypsy is out in public, whenever she's speaking to the public, Dee Dee is always right there, holding onto her hand, gripping onto her shoulder, controlling her with just a touch. Because if Gypsy started to say anything that Dee Dee didn't like, Dee Dee would squeeze her hand, and that meant shut up. And then once they are settled in Missouri, Dee Dee decides to use Hurricane Katrina to her advantage. Because Dee Dee starts to say that because of Hurricane Katrina, she has lost all of Gypsy's medical records.
Yeah.
Very convenient. So now,
Right.
when Dee Dee and Gypsy would visit the doctors, Dee Dee would come out with the usual BS. My daughter has this symptom, that symptom, she has this illness, blah, blah, blah. The doctor would say, well, can I see her medical records? Dee Dee would say, oh, I wish you could, but I'm so sorry. They have been destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. We were victims of Hurricane Katrina and we've lost everything. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. And Gypsy has all of these illnesses. And unbelievably, there were some doctors that just went, okay, we believe you. We take you at your word. This was essentially a clean slate for Dee Dee. This couldn't have worked out better for her. But that is not the only thing that Dee Dee did as soon as they got to Missouri. Oh no. Because the next thing that Dee Dee decided to do was change Gypsy Rose's age. So currently Gypsy was 16 years old, but then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, Dee Dee started to say that her daughter was 12. Dee Dee told neighbours, doctors, that Gypsy was 12. Everyone believed that Gypsy was 12. I mean, you only have to look at photos of Gypsy around this time, and she does look very young. I mean, she's always dressed in princess dresses. She's always holding a cuddly toy. She does have a very young face. She can pass for 12 years old. And as well, you have to remember that Gypsy pretty much has no education. So this was another factor on why people believed that she was 12, because she did act a lot younger than she was. And you might be wondering, but Gypsy knows she's not 12. Like, Gypsy knows, like, surely she knows that she's 16. But Gypsy was very confused about her age. Dee Dee was never really honest with her about her age. When Gypsy actually did turn 12, from that moment on, Gypsy was never really told her age. She never really seemed to get older. So even though Gypsy is 16, she doesn't really know that she's 16, because again, you have to remember how much medication Gypsy is on. She is constantly confused, docile, she's kind of spaced out. Well, what was the benefit of lying about Gypsy's age? Well, there were a couple of benefits. I think the main reason was that she wanted to keep Gypsy as young as possible. She never wanted Gypsy to grow up. She always wanted Gypsy to be a child. But then there is also another benefit. She would continue to get money off the state for a lot longer because Gypsy wasn't an adult, or it would be a lot longer until she turned an adult. And over the next few years, as Gypsy went through her teenage years, her life just stayed exactly the same. My heart just truly breaks. It really does, for what Gypsy Rose went through for so many years. Because at this point, she's just drugged up and sedated most of the time. She has had a number of surgeries that she did not need, and because of these surgeries, she's actually in pain quite a lot of the time. So she starts taking painkillers, but now Gypsy Rose actually starts to suffer with addiction. It's like just another thing that she is now having to battle. She becomes addicted to painkillers. So she starts sneaking her mom's painkillers. It starts off by just taking 1 or 2, but then she starts to build up her tolerance, and then she starts taking 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then she's just in full-blown addiction, and she's just taking painkillers to experience a high and an escape from her oppressive life. Gypsy also still is not allowed to eat any food. She is always fed through her feeding tube. Can you even imagine that? Imagine you can eat, but you're not allowed, and you are fed all of your food through liquid through your stomach. Gypsy just wanted to be normal. She just wanted to go in the fridge and eat something if she wanted to. She wanted to taste food. And at this point, Gypsy was obviously 16, but now she's moving through her later teenage years. But Dee Dee is still forcing her to act like a little girl. She would always make sure that Gypsy was dressed in childish clothing, that she had cuddly toys. Whenever they were in the neighborhood, she would force Gypsy to play and hang around with the younger kids in the neighborhood, not the teenagers. Dee Dee would also go around telling everybody that Gypsy had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. And I personally think that she did this as almost a contingency plan, just in case Gypsy actually started telling the truth, that she could walk, that she could eat, that she didn't have any of these illnesses. And then Dee Dee would come swooping in and saying, oh no, you can't trust her. She has the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. She doesn't know what she's talking about. So everyone would talk to Gypsy like she's a little kid. And this would frustrate Gypsy so much, because even though Gypsy wasn't 100% certain of her age, Gypsy felt like she related more to the teenagers in her community than the little kids that she was being forced to hang out with. Gypsy just wanted friends. She wanted a boyfriend. She just wanted to be a teenager. However, now we get to when Gypsy is aged 18 years old. And this is where things started to change because Gypsy got her very first friend. And this was a girl, 18-year-old Aaliyah, who was a neighbor. And Aaliyah was...
They interviewed her in the documentary as well.
Such a kind, sweethearted girl, and she befriended Gypsy, even though she thought that Gypsy was 4 years younger. So she thought that Gypsy was 14, but Gypsy is actually 18. She's the same age as Aaliyah. So the two of them start hanging out, and Dee Dee allows this, which did shock me. And this is when Gypsy Rose starts to become rebellious, because now that she's friends with Aaliyah, she starts seeing how a normal child, a normal teenager, should live. Aaliyah was allowed to go to school. She was allowed to have friends. She was allowed to use the internet. She was allowed social media. She was allowed a boyfriend. And Gypsy was so envious because that's what she wanted. And at this point, Dee Dee and Gypsy had a laptop in the home, which was gifted by a charity because a lot of things were gifted. But Gypsy was only allowed to use the laptop to go on children's websites, probably a lot of Disney websites because Gypsy was really obsessed with Disney. It was kind of an escape for her. But one night, when Dee Dee was sleeping, Gypsy crept out of the bed that they shared, because that is something that I haven't mentioned yet, but most nights Gypsy and Dee Dee would share the same bed, which is very similar to what Dee Dee and her own mom did, if you remember. So this one night, Gypsy creeps out of bed. She manages to get out of bed without waking her mama, and she creeps to the laptop. And she would now stay on the computer for hours every single night in secret. She actually made a secret Facebook profile and she started talking to Aaliyah online, and they started talking about a lot of things, like just normal teenage things. And this was the first time that Gypsy's eyes were opened to the outside world. She's now 18 years old and she's only just starting to learn about the world. So Gypsy had this small taste of freedom. But then one night when Gypsy is on the laptop, Dee Dee catches her, and Dee Dee is so furious. She actually goes into the other room, picks up a coat hanger, and viciously starts to beat Gypsy. And now...
Yeah, this is the point where Dee Dee becomes physically violent towards Gypsy. So, really, I really feel like Dee Dee had an inability to perceive anyone other than herself as actual, like, feeling real beings in life. She just had, like, this syndrome of being a protagonist in her life, and Gypsy was like an extension of herself.
This is the first of many times where Dee Dee would now physically abuse her daughter. She then dragged Gypsy back to bed and told her she was never allowed on the laptop ever again. And Gypsy was heartbroken. Like I said, she had just gotten a taste of freedom. So now we get to 2011. Gypsy is currently 19 years old, even though to the outside world, she is only 15. And one day, Gypsy and Dee Dee go to a sci-fi convention. And this trip really would change everything. Gypsy went, she was all dressed up. I think she went as a character from Star Wars, and I'm not very good with Star Wars, so I don't know who she was. And Gypsy was absolutely loving this because Gypsy was a very social person. Whenever she was allowed out of the house, which was not very often, she loved to talk to people. She just loved to soak up everything that she can because she was stuck in that pink house for so many hours, completely controlled, completely oppressed. And so many people fell in love with Gypsy from the moment they met her because she was so charismatic. So Gypsy...
And this is another thing that comes into the point of contention later on. Gypsy is very charismatic. And this is something that people tend to argue about after her release from prison. Whether she is not like taken up the role as the manipulator of her image, as the manipulator of her PR. I have some mixed feelings about this, but it's a point that does come into the
convention. She's talking to a lot
Into
of
the
people.
fray.
And when Dee Dee's back is turned, Gypsy starts talking to a 35-year-old man called Dan. And Gypsy found this man attractive. And Dan asked her if she had Facebook, which obviously Gypsy does have a secret Facebook account. So Gypsy was like, yeah, gave him her secret Facebook name. He said that he would look her up when he got home. And Gypsy was so excited. She was so excited that she has now met a friend in the real world. So on that night, Gypsy snuck out of bed again. Even though her mom had forbid her from using the laptop again, Gypsy wanted to risk it because she had met a friend. So she goes to the laptop and she saw that Dan had sent her a friend request. And over the next few months, Gypsy snuck onto Facebook every single night and spoke to Dan over Facebook. And Gypsy has said that the relationship was, quote, sexually charged. Now, I feel like I need to stop for a minute here because Dan is 35 years old. And in the beginning of their relationship over Facebook, Gypsy is only 15 years old. Yes, I know that she's an adult. Technically, she's an adult because she's technically 19.
But nobody knows that. To everyone, including herself, she's 15.
Outside world, Gypsy is 15. Like, what? No. Now, obviously, there is a chance that Dan did know her real age, but I don't think he did in the beginning. So over time, Gypsy started to trust Dan and she started to open up to him about her life and about the way her mom treats her. And at some point over these few months when she's talking to Dan, Gypsy actually does find her real birth certificate. And this is when it first got revealed to Gypsy that she's actually 19 years old. So Gypsy now tells Dan that she's 19 years old, which is why I think that he thought that she was 15 to begin with. So then Dan says, well, you're an adult. You're free to go. Why don't you just leave? So this is exactly what Gypsy does.
Okay, so she knows her real age. Okay. Because she keeps on saying like she knew something wasn't right because her mom would always give her a different answer every time that she would ask about her age. So she was mostly confused, and also she was on a lot of drugs her entire life. So, yeah.
At 2 a.m. one evening, Gypsy sneaks out of bed, packs a bag, takes some money,
Is there
and
anything from... No.
walks out of the family home. Because remember, she can walk. She doesn't need that wheelchair. And Gypsy hitchhikes all the way to Dan's home. And Gypsy is over the moon. She is on cloud 9 right now because she thinks that Dan is her Prince Charming, that he is going to save her, protect her from her mom. She's now escaped from home. Her mom is never going to find her.
She has a princess fantasy.
However, she does. When her mom woke up, she saw that her daughter was missing. She soon figured out that her daughter had been going secretly on the laptop, and she managed to find out who Dan was and where he lived. So it wasn't long until Dee Dee showed up at Dan's home. Dee Dee starts banging on the door, demanding that Dan open the door. She starts screaming through the door that Gypsy is a minor, that she'll call the police. So Dan opens the door and Gypsy immediately says, I know I'm 19. And Dee Dee, she is a professional gaslighter. She starts saying, oh no, what are you talking about? You're 15. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Just trying to distract her. And she drags Gypsy out of that home. And Gypsy doesn't really put up a fight. And as you can imagine, once Gypsy returns home from running away, Dee Dee is not happy at all. And things are about to get much, much worse for Gypsy. This is where the physical abuse gets so much worse. Because once they return home, Dee Dee grabs a hammer and she completely smashes up the laptop. And then she threatens to break every single one of Gypsy's fingers with the hammer. And in order to teach Gypsy a lesson, to make sure that she never runs away again, Dee Dee ties Gypsy up to the bed using handcuffs and a dog leash. And Gypsy would be left handcuffed to the bed for 2 weeks. You heard that right. Just handcuffed, not allowed to leave. Dee Dee also starved Gypsy for 2 days straight until Gypsy was literally doubled over in hunger pain. And even still, after those 2 days, she was barely fed through her feeding tube. And
attached to the bed. Like, I feel like all of these are circumstances which, for me, are completely mitigating of the crime that she commits.
Dee Dee would also beat Gypsy with the coat hanger. And then finally, after being handcuffed to the bed for 2 weeks, Dee Dee decides to unhandcuff her daughter and then to also make sure that Gypsy never does anything like this ever again. Dee Dee said that she was going to cast a spell on her daughter Gypsy, that she was going to put a hex on her. I am not kidding here. Dee Dee started to bang on that she had practiced dark magic when she was younger, that she was a witch. And Dee Dee said that she was going to put...
Pay attention to the magical thinking, because this is not the end of it. The magical thinking narrative carries on not only with Dee Dee, but later on as well.
A hex on Gypsy to make sure that Gypsy never found love again. And this is when Dee Dee first obtained a cow's tongue along with photos of Dan and Gypsy. She then put all of this in a mason jar along with Gypsy's menstrual blood. Yep. Gypsy's menstrual blood, and I don't even want to think about how she got that. So she put the cow's tongue, the photos, the menstrual blood all in a mason jar, and she cast her little spell, and then she buried it.
As one does. I'm sorry, like, I always laugh in discomfort. Like, I just have this image of, like, her standing with the jar, putting the tongue. Oh my god. I have a very vivid imagination, and this is not a good moment for it.
In the backyard, and said that Gypsy would now never ever find love again. And Gypsy genuinely believed that she had this hex on her, that she was destined to be on her own for the rest of her life, that she would be trapped there with her mom for the rest of her life. But was that the last time that Gypsy would attempt to run away? No. Gypsy actually planned to run away a few months later. She packed a bag and everything and hid the bag under her bed. But Dee Dee managed to find the bag before Gypsy was able to run away. And the two of them got into a huge argument. And in response, Gypsy picked up a gun that Dee Dee kept on her side.
Oh my god, they are fighting. I love the shadiness between them.
Table, a gun that Dee Dee always threatened Gypsy with. So Gypsy picked up this gun, pointed it at her mom, and shot her mom 10 times. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
Gypsy picked up a gun and shot her mom 10 times. But did she kill her mom? No. Because it turns out that it was not a real gun. It was a BB gun. But Gypsy thought it was a real gun. So she only...
Yeah, that like... shows you something. I forgot about the BB gun. I completely forgot about it. But it shows you that Gypsy is at her breaking point. I mean, she probably is now at the age where she's realizing that half of the shit that her mom is telling her is not true. She's probably doubting everything that she's ever been told. She doesn't even know how old she is. She always gets a different answer. She has a sex drive. She's an adult woman now. And she cannot do anything. She's chained to her bed and she's starved and she doesn't have access to internet. She has to stay in the wheelchair. She has to pretend to be this petite little girl with the high-pitched voice. And I totally see how, in her mind, she is a prisoner. No, it's not in her mind. She is a prisoner. And I do think that the only way for her to see a way out is to kill the mom. Honestly, like, I think if I was in her shoes, I would have done the same.
Caused minor injuries to her mom from this, but it seems like Gypsy was ready to kill her mom in that moment. And then after this incident with the BB gun, another year passes and Gypsy is just forced to live this fake life that her mom is forcing her to live. However, now Gypsy knows more. She knows more that the world that she's living in is fake. She now knows her real age, but there's just nothing that she can do about it. She knows that she can eat. She actually does eat. Like, she actually does go into the fridge sometimes and sneak some food behind her mom's back. So she knows that she can eat. She knows that she can walk. But she has to go along with her mom's sick and twisted fantasy. Otherwise, she will be severely punished. And then I think a question that a lot of people have over this case, questions that I'm still seeing online today, is why didn't Gypsy leave? Why didn't she just get up out of her wheelchair?
They always say that why abuse victims don't just get up and leave. I mean, she was brought up with this mechanism of control. Where would she go? How would she fend for herself? She doesn't know what the outside world looks like. This is not an argument.
And walk. Why didn't she just go to the police? Well, it's not always that simple, because we have to think about the level of control that
She might not even know what police is, to be honest. Or like maybe she knows what police is, but she must severely doubt being believed by them.
Dee has over Gypsy. This case is truly unprecedented. Gypsy has been manipulated and brainwashed from the moment she has been born. She is now 19 years old. She doesn't have an education. She is completely isolated. She has no one in the world but her mom. And also, Gypsy regularly goes to the hospital and the doctors, and they always seem to be on her mom's side. Medical professionals.
And then she did try run away, and her mom found her. So she probably feels like nothing that she does can outsmart her mom, and she has no tools to outsmart her mom because her mom prevented her from getting them. You know? So like, okay, murder is a pretty drastic measure, but honestly, I feel like in this case, in my opinion, it's justified.
Seem to be on her mum's side. You have to remember that CPS has also gone out to the house and failed Gypsy. They closed the case. Dee has everyone manipulated into thinking that Gypsy is this sick child. Even if Gypsy wanted to go to the police, Gypsy probably thinks that even if she walked into the police, her mom would be able to manipulate the situation into nothing changing. But then you also have to remember that most of the time, Gypsy is completely drugged up. Gypsy is on a cocktail of medication.
Raven. Raven says Didi looks a bit like a dragon lord. She does look like a dragon lord.
And if you...
No, Didi looks like a brood mother. That's what she looks like.
You looked at the medication cabinet in that home.
Not a dragon lord, but the dragon lord.
That much medication outside of a pharmacy. And that is why it is not that simple for Gypsy to leave. And also, you have to realise that Gypsy is like anybody in this world. She wants and craves love and affection. And the only person in the world that is giving that to her is her mom. However, all of that is soon about to change, because after putting up with her oppressive life for so many years, Gypsy has had enough, and she decides to take action, and she decides to get her very first boyfriend. And this was a man called Nicholas Godejohn, and this is where everything changes for everyone involved in this case. So by the time we get to late 2012, this is now a whole year after the whole running away incident. And Gypsy now, unbelievably, is a 21-year-old woman. Now, over that year, Gypsy had been playing her role perfectly, trying to regain her mom's trust. And this is when Dee allowed Gypsy to start using the internet again, under strict supervision. However, as you can probably guess, now that there was a laptop back in the house, as soon as Dee was asleep, Gypsy would now sneak back onto the laptop, go back on Facebook, look at whatever she wanted to online. And this is when she started speaking to her friend Aaliyah again on Facebook. And Gypsy would talk to Aaliyah, telling her that she wanted a boyfriend. She just wanted to be normal. She just wanted friends. And this is when Aaliyah suggested that Gypsy should go on a dating site. And this is exactly what Gypsy did. She went on a
Little did she know.
Christian dating site, made herself a
I can't believe what Aliyah must have felt after learning about what happened. Aliyah's just like, yeah, girl, sign up to that Tinder. Yeah, girl, I encourage it. Sign up to a dating site. And then...
profile. And this is how she met Nick Godejohn, who is a very significant person in this case.
Magical thinking alert ahead.
So Nick was 2 years older than Gypsy. So he was currently 23 years old and he lived about 8 hours away in Wisconsin. And Gypsy and Nick hit it off immediately. Nick shared with Gypsy that he had autism spectrum disorder, and Gypsy shared with Nick all of her...
Which is very important as well, because there's a huge point of contention about Gypsy being out of the prison and living her best life, and Nick being sentenced for life in prison, because Gypsy got a very small sentence in comparison. I mean, yeah, Gypsy served 8 years and Nick is there for life. And there's a lot of there's a group of following, I think mostly like soccer moms, trying to justify Nick's crimes by arguing his autism, that he was just an autistic boy with very few social skills. Plus, you know, the autism makes it harder for the social skills. For his social skills, he didn't understand interactions with people. He felt intensely, and then they sort of placed the blame on Gypsy, calling her a master manipulator, saying that she's inherited these traits from her mom, basically convincing him to do her dirty deeds, you know. But we can talk about this when we get there.
Illnesses, and they had a lot in common. Both of them were pretty isolated in life. Both of them struggled to socialize, and the two of them bonded over their shared struggles. And over time, Gypsy started opening up more and more to Nick, and she started saying that she was suspicious of her mom, and she suspected that her mom was lying about all of the illnesses. Gypsy also opened up that her mom was physically abusing her, that she was very manipulative, and Nick said that he would be there for Gypsy, that he would protect her from anything, that he would be her knight in shining armor, her prince charming. And this is exactly what Gypsy wanted to hear. And in the beginning, this sounds like a really sweet relationship. You know, two 20-something-year-olds have met online, they're bonding over their shared struggles, and they're just hitting it off. However, now things start to get a little bit murky, because after they had been talking back and forth for a few months, this is when Nick started to reveal his darker side. Nick started to tell Gypsy that he had multiple personalities. He had a good side, he had an evil side, and we'll get back to the evil side in a minute. But he also had a dark sexual side, and that was the side of
And also that he was a 300-year-old werewolf.
him that he now wanted Gypsy to meet. And it turns out that Nick did have a dark sexual side, because only a few months prior, Nick was actually arrested for watching pornography in McDonald's, and I'm pretty sure I read that he was also masturbating in public at the same time. It's like, who does that? Who does that in McDonald's? So Nick...
A true catch. But this is like, I feel like this is kind of an example of why when we are in really difficult situations, and I think that this happened to Gypsy as well, because I feel like Disney did her dirty and Disney did all of us dirty, because it's like when we are, and it happened to me as well when I was in a time of struggle, I felt like I needed to find a man who's going to swoop in and rescue me, and I'm just going to be the princess, and he's going to come in on his white steed and take me away. And generally, ill attracts ill. So if you are in a bad place, you're probably going to be attracting not so good people, and especially romantically, because when we are suffering, we attract other people who suffer, I think. And experience have showed me that that is true. I no longer believe all the woo shit, but I do see how that pans out. I don't think if you're struggling with something, a relationship can help you. I think we are responsible to help ourselves first so that we can be in a good place to build a healthy relationship with others. No one can solve our problems for us. We have to do them. Ima, he's on the way. Relax. You're still in your 20s.
He's talking to Gypsy.
Professors take longer to cook. Also, you're into men. So, you know, the bar is low.
And he starts telling Gypsy that he is into BDSM. Now, Gypsy, she has not been exposed to pretty much anything in the world. She doesn't even know what BDSM is. She has to Google it. Nick also started to say that he was into role play, very aggressive sex, and the two of them enter into a more sexual relationship. Now, I want to stress that this is just online. This is just an online sexual relationship. They have no intentions of actually meeting at this point. So the two of them would role play, and Gypsy would dress up as various different characters to fulfill Nick's fantasies, and she would take more sexually suggestive photos of herself. However, Gypsy, she didn't really want to be doing this. This was not her thing. Like, she didn't really like this, and this was not her idea of what love was, of what sex was. But Gypsy's point of reference for love are Disney films. Like, she thinks that Prince Charming is going to come in, sweep her off her feet, rescue her from her...
And then her idea of sex is her adventure with her grandfather. So, like, I think that abuse victims can have the tendency to fall into these very, like, submission, domination, BDSM type of sexual dynamics, because it is so reminiscent of the harm and the hurt that has been done to them. And especially when the trauma hasn't been processed, it's something that tends to attract people. I personally knew some people that had been sexually assaulted when they were younger, and as adults, the way for that unprocessed trauma to come out was that they became hypersexual and super promiscuous, and trying to reclaim their control over what has happened to them through really degrading themselves, but they thought that that was empowerment, you know? So it's something that sadly it happens, like, because your mind cannot make sense of the hurt and the harm that has been done to you. So a way of claiming that control is to go into these super risky sexual behaviors and super extreme dynamics, because you're trying to make sense of that hurt that was done to you.
And they're going to run off into the sunset and live happily ever after. And that is not really what is going on here with Nick. But Gypsy is so desperate, and she craves love so much that even though she's not into BDSM, she's not really into role play, she does it. And unbelievably, 2 years pass. And Gypsy is basically living...
It's another thing about Gypsy, because, like, her entire life is about submission. So, like, if you think about it, she had to submit to her mom her entire life, you know, go with the flow about all these different diseases. Then the situation with the grandfather happened. She had no control. She was a child. So she was forced into being submissive. So now that Nick is giving her the scenario of the sexual exploitation, the perfect role for her is to slip into something that she knows so well, something that she's been programmed and beaten into doing her entire life, which is being submissive.
two different lives. In the daytime, she is playing her role perfectly, being the very sick child that her mom wants her to be. And then as soon as her mom is asleep, she would sneak out of bed and go on the laptop and speak to Nick. And after 2 years, this is when the pair decided that they wanted to meet in person for the very first time. But they needed to figure out a plan on how they were going to do this. Dee Dee wasn't just about to let Gypsy go out and get a boyfriend, so they needed to make it look like they just so happened to bump into one another, and then the relationship would start from there. So one day, Gypsy and Dee Dee are planning on going to the movie theatres to see the new Cinderella film, because that was something that Dee Dee and Gypsy did quite often. They would go to the cinema a lot. So this is when Gypsy thought to herself, this is where I can bump into Nick, and this is where we can meet. So Nick makes the bus journey from Wisconsin down to Missouri. Gypsy was going to dress as Cinderella because obviously Disney, she's obsessed with Disney, and she's going to see Cinderella. And she tells Nick to dress as Prince Charming, which he does. And in March of 2015, this is when Gypsy and Nick meet face to face for the first time. And when Gypsy laid her eyes on Nick, she was so overwhelmed. This is everything that she has ever wanted in her life, especially because he's dressed up as Prince Charming. But she's got to keep it cool because she doesn't know this person. She has to accidentally meet him, bump into him. So they get into the cinema, they sit down, and they start watching Cinderella. And then at some point in the movie, Gypsy goes to the bathroom, and Dee Dee allows Gypsy to go to the bathroom on her own. And then not too long after, Nick also goes to the bathroom. And then in the middle of the movie, the two of them, Gypsy and Nick, go into one of the bathroom stalls to have sex. This is the first time they've met, and they just go and have sex in a toilet in a cinema. Or at least that is how the story has always been told. However, in the recent documentary that has just been released, Gypsy has said that it didn't quite happen like that. What actually happened is they got into the bathroom stall, Nick pulled out his penis, but he couldn't get an erection, and that was that. And I don't think they even had sex. I literally just think he pulled out his penis and he couldn't get an erection. And then they just agreed to say, oh, we've lost our virginity. And Gypsy was very disappointed in the whole experience because, like I said, Gypsy's point of reference for everything in life are Disney movies, are fairy tales and love and sex. It doesn't look like that in the movies. This was reality. But Gypsy kind of just brushed it off, and she was like, oh well, this is my Prince Charming. He's going to save me. So then after the movie, Gypsy and Dee Dee and Nick accidentally bump into one another and they start talking. Gypsy and Nick exchange phone numbers, and then they both go their separate ways. And Gypsy thought that her plan worked. But did it? Of course not. No. Because Dee Dee did not like Nick at all. She thought that he was a creep. She said to Gypsy, he's a grown-ass man and he has gone to a Disney film on his own. He has no girlfriend, no children. He's a creep. But Dee Dee ordered Gypsy to never have any contact with Nick again. And Gypsy was distraught because Nick was her first boyfriend. Gypsy naively thought that her mum might be happy for her. And Gypsy, in response, for the very first time, started to rebel against her mom. This was the final straw. And Dee Dee was furious that her daughter was rebelling. She actually started to administer more and more medication to Gypsy to try and keep her under control. But Gypsy just kept rebelling more and more. And Gypsy was ranting to Nick over Facebook, telling him about everything that her mom was doing to her, that she needed to be free from her mom. And this is when Nick said to Gypsy that he would protect her from anyone. And Gypsy replied, even my mother? And this is when Nick's evil side comes back out. Nick actually said that his evil side, his evil personality, would take care of her mother. So Nick's evil personality was an alter ego that he had, and he was a very, very bad person. This alter ego had fantasies of rape and murder, and this alter ego was also a 500-year-old vampire that liked to kill.
Oh, I
And
heard
that if
he was
Gypsy
a
needed help
werewolf.
with her
Okay, it's a
mother,
vampire.
Nick's evil personality could
Potato,
help out.
potato,
And Gypsy
okay.
went away and thought about this. She was torn because even though she wanted to be free, she didn't want any harm to come to her mom. And in Gypsy's mind, in that moment,
I don't know if she didn't want any harm to come to her mom. I think she wanted harm to come to her mom. I think this part is something she had to say for the court case. Honestly. I think she knew what was gonna happen, but also I still don't think that she should have gone to jail for this, because I honestly think it was her only way out. Like, for me, she was fighting for her life, and the murder of her mom is only justified because it was for her own survival. Like, if her mom didn't die, she would never be free, and I wholeheartedly believe that. But I'm not buying the fact that she didn't want something to happen to her mom. She did want something to happen to her mom. It was the only way out.
she thought that there was no other way that she would escape.
Yeah.
She truly thought that she was going to die in that home with her mom.
course.
Gypsy felt like she couldn't turn to anyone. She couldn't turn to any friends, family. She felt like she couldn't go to the police because the police wouldn't believe her. She felt like she couldn't run away because her mother would just track her down. So this is when one day Gypsy sent a message
Yeah.
to Nick. She told him that she needed help from his evil personality. And this is when she sent another message which simply read, quote, "Would you kill my mother for me?" And we now get to the terrible events of today's case. Because almost immediately, Nick agreed to Gypsy's plans. So now Nick and Gypsy start to
And
plan.
this is another thing, like, there's all these, like, people trying to defend Nick because, like, because of his autism, and saying that Gypsy manipulated him. But to be honest, he really did jump right into it. And this whole thing about his dark side and all that, like, I see how he's not fully compos mentis, but I think with him it's a different situation. Like, he had the choice not to get involved. For Gypsy, she was fighting for her life.
The murder of
And
Dee.
also he was the one who could have called for fucking help. He's the one who could have actually brought this to the authorities, build a movement, I don't know, free her in a less drastic way. I think that he 100% is guilty.
At this point, Gypsy is
And this is not about me hating on a man, but really the circumstances, there's no way to innocent him.
currently 23 years old and Nick is 25. And I also just want to point out that this is approximately 2 months after the whole meeting for the first time at the movie theatres. So they have literally only met in person once, and Nick is agreeing to murder Gypsy's mother. Right away, Nick asks Gypsy to research methods on killing. And Gypsy does. She goes away, she looks at guns, she looks at poisonings, she looks at arson at one point, but then Gypsy and Nick decide that the best way to kill Dee Dee was using a knife. So under Nick's instructions, Gypsy steals a hunting knife from a Walmart. And I assume, because Gypsy never goes anywhere without Dee Dee, I assume that Dee Dee was also there and Gypsy just stole the knife behind her back. Gypsy also records a home video showing the layout of her home so she can send this video to Nick so Nick knows the layout of her home and knows where her mom Dee Dee will be. And this video that Gypsy records is so chilling because when Gypsy gets to their bedroom, Gypsy goes over to the bed and she points to the bed where her mom will be sleeping. And then she starts to make stabbing motions on this recorded video, insinuating that, yes, Nick, this is where my mom will be and this is where you will be stabbing her. And it truly is just chilling. Nick and Gypsy decide that in a couple...
I think that this is why she couldn't argue like this complete self-defense, because of all the theater around the killing, like them sending the videos like, here you will be stabbing her, and then there was videos after the kill that still until today's day people still call into question Gypsy's dire circumstance, I guess, or innocence, or whether or not she should have received a tougher sentence. I have mixed feelings on that, but let's get to those videos and I'll tell you why.
Of weeks' time, Nick will get on a Greyhound bus from Wisconsin all the way to Missouri, which Gypsy is paying for, by the way. And then as soon as Nick arrives in Missouri, that is when he is going to murder Dee Dee. And now we get to the 9th of June, 2015. This is when the murder was going to take place. Nick travels...
I'm gonna pause here. I need to run to the bathroom. I will be right back. Let's get back into it because we have 20 minutes. I have to leave by 10:30, so let's finish it.
Down from Wisconsin to Missouri, it is around an 8-hour trip. Once he arrives in Missouri, he checks into a motel and he just waits for a message from Gypsy to let him know that her mother, Dee Dee, is asleep. Back at the Blanchard household, Dee Dee and Gypsy are getting ready for bed.
And I have so much to say when it comes to the trial. Like, I have so much to say. So let's try to get through it.
And as soon as Dee Dee is asleep, Gypsy messages Nick that she's asleep and everything is good to go. So Nick soon arrives at the home, and as soon as he arrives, he says, quote, "That bitch is dead." Nick is wearing a pair of gloves. He is holding the hunting knife that Gypsy stole from Walmart, and he instructs Gypsy to go to the bathroom and shut the door, which Gypsy did. She went into the bathroom, she shut the door, and she covered her ears. And this is when Nick crept into Dee Dee's bedroom. He got on the bed, which awoke Dee Dee. Dee Dee saw Nick, and she screamed out and said, "Who are you?" Before Nick replied with, "I'm your fucking nightmare." before he lifted the knife into the air and brought it
So
down
dramatic.
and stabbed Dee Dee. And after this, Nick just launched a frenzied attack. Dee Dee rolled onto her stomach, and now Nick repeatedly stabs Dee Dee in the back. And Dee Dee is screaming for her life. Gypsy is in the bathroom and she has her ears covered, but she can hear everything. She can hear her mom's screams. And at some point during the attack, Dee Dee screams out for Gypsy. She screams out Gypsy's name. She asks Gypsy for help, but Gypsy just sits there in the bathroom. And Nick ends up stabbing Dee Dee a total number of 17 times. And this is when Dee Dee Blanchard lost her life. Nick then went into the bathroom and he told Gypsy that the job was done. And now everything goes a little bit crazy because Nick, he is
different than the new model.
exhilarated. He is on a high. And he goes back into Dee Dee's bedroom. And according to some sources, this is when Nick contemplates having sex with Dee Dee's body. Yeah, Nick now contemplates necrophilia. But this is too much for Gypsy. She is like, no. And she actually says, no, you are not.
Oh my god. You see, like, these are the little details that make me go like, no, Nick. I think it's safer for everyone if he's in jail.
Having sex with my mom's body. So then Nick says, okay, if I can't rape your mom's body, you have to let me rape you. And Gypsy agreed. She didn't want him to have sex with her mom, so she essentially sacrificed herself. So the two of them have sex, even though it's not sex. I think in the beginning it was consensual, but then Gypsy says no. She actually, in the middle of sex, says no, I don't want to do this. But Nick doesn't stop. He continues. So Nick now rapes Gypsy. During the rape, he
I'm not sure where this information came from exactly, but if it came from Gypsy, like, okay, this changes nothing, but I am not sure, like, if it did came from Gypsy, if I would 100% believe this. I know it might sound controversial, but I think that the way she was hypersexualizing herself would prevent her from disagreeing. This doesn't take away from the fact that this is a traumatic event, shouldn't have happened. The circumstances are insane, inhuman, and all that. And Nick is a piece of shit and should rot for the rest of his life in jail. But I'm sensing little snippets of narrative manipulation that is sometimes being argued on the internet against Gypsy, which I'm a little bit of two minds about this. But let's get there.
Also bites her and he leaves her covered in bruises. Afterwards, Nick picks up the murder weapon, which he makes Gypsy clean.
Also, there's another thing where there's a video of them in a hotel after the incident talking about the death of her mom, and they're both like giggling. They're sort of on like this weird high. I think she said that she was on a lot of medication because she took all these painkillers. So there's a video of them like giggling and then having sex, talking about how they are this Bonnie and Clyde couple and yada yada yada. And this is another reason why I feel like maybe that, like, the shock of her mom being dead, she's suddenly free, she defeated the monster that kept her in prison her entire life, she fought for survival, now she's free, this is the man who freed her, like this fantasy in the most twisted way imaginable is coming true. It begets this high of like, I'm free and I'm a bad bitch because I murdered my mom who kept me imprisoned, you know. And they're on this like weird dark fantasy high ride, which I think would contradict the rape narrative. But also, who knows? Like, as I said, in my mind, the sexual assault changes nothing.
They also clean up the crime scene a little bit, like try and get rid of fingerprints and everything. I truly don't know how they thought they were going to get away with this. Gypsy stole a load of cash from the house, and then the two of them make their way over to the motel. And they were actually caught on camera, and you can see that they're giggling, they're laughing. They don't look like two people that have just murdered somebody.
Yeah.
Hi, honey.
That's the reason.
I'm feeling it.
They stay in the motel for a couple of days, and then the two of them make their way back to Wisconsin to Nick's home. But they didn't want to take the murder weapon on the bus with them. They thought it might be too risky, just in case if someone searched them or something. They didn't want to have a murder weapon on them. So the two of them decided that it would be safer to mail the murder weapon back to Nick's home. Yeah, they literally get the knife, they put it in an envelope, they write Nick's address on it, and they put the murder weapon in the post. They also put in the post all of the cash that Gypsy stole from the home, which was approximately $4,000. And that's just crazy to me. That just tells you everything about their personalities, on how naive they both are, really. Why would they put the murder weapon through the post where anyone could intercept it? Why wouldn't they just dispose of it somewhere else? Why would they mail it to Nick's home address? Like, I truly just don't understand. So then the two of them arrive back.
Because he's a 500-year-old vampire, I guess. I'm sorry, but I can't take
Nick's
Nick
home,
seriously.
and the whole fairy tale that Gypsy had built up in her head soon came to an end, because things with Nick were not how she thought that they would be. Because as soon as they got to Nick's home, Nick started to become incredibly controlling. He started to tell Gypsy what she could wear, what she could eat, what she could watch on TV, how she could act. And this came at a huge shock to Gypsy. Gypsy realized in that moment that she had just gone from the arms of one abuser, her mom, into the arms of another one, Nick. Because how Nick was being with Gypsy once they were back at his home really reminded her of her own mother. And Gypsy is living in Nick's home for the next 5 days. And over those 5 days, Gypsy is trying to look at the news, see if her mom's body has been discovered, but it hasn't. But Gypsy is not happy about this. She actually feels incredibly guilty at the thought of her mom dead in her home and no one has found her. So what does Gypsy do? She goes to Facebook and she logs into her mom's Facebook account and she makes a post on Facebook, which is now a very infamous post relating to this case. And she simply posts on Facebook, quote, "That bitch is dead," which are the exact words that Nick said when he entered the home to murder Dee Dee Blanchard. And Gypsy chose those exact words for a reason. And why did Gypsy post this on Facebook? Well, she wanted someone to be alarmed enough about the post to call the police, for the police to then go out to the home and find her mom. However, it didn't have that effect. People actually just thought that Dee Dee's Facebook account had been hacked. So Gypsy then made another comment on that post, which read, quote, "I fucking slashed that fat pig and raped her sweet innocent daughter. Her scream was so fucking loud. Lol." Now this comment sent alarm bells in a lot of people. A lot of people were...
I feel like they are getting to a point where, like, her ignorance about the world, which was caused by her mom, is something that gets her caught ultimately. They shouldn't have done this.
Now really concerned about Dee Dee because this was not like her. They seem to figure out that her account...
Which is like, the mom got murdered, but I draw the line at posting the text. Like, honestly, maybe it's controversial. I can't feel sorry for the mom. I don't feel sorry for Dee Dee. I don't care that she's dead. I really don't. I'm not gonna say I'm glad that she's dead. I'm gonna say I don't give a fuck that she's dead. My fucks are to be given for people who deserve it. And she was not one of them.
Wasn't hacked, so the police were called. They immediately went out to the Blanchard household, but no one was answering the door. Neighbours at this point had gathered outside and were begging police to break down the door, see if Dee Dee was okay, see if Gypsy was okay, because you have to remember that all of the neighbours think that Gypsy is this incredibly sick child that needs constant 24-hour care. And they were really concerned with Gypsy because if something had happened to Dee Dee, what was going to happen to Gypsy. But the police couldn't just storm in the house, so they had to wait a couple of hours until they had a search warrant. As soon as they had that, then they did break down the door. And this is when they came across the horrific scene and they found Dee Dee stabbed to death in her bed. But then sheer panic ran through the neighborhood because Gypsy Rose Blanchard was missing and her wheelchair was still in the home.
It's definitely a homicide investigation here, but the main focus remains on that 19-year-old Gypsy Rose and searching for her.
People were going out of their minds. People thought, oh my God, someone has broken into this house, murdered Dee Dee, and then kidnapped Gypsy. People were worried that Gypsy didn't have her wheelchair, that she didn't have her medication. They thought, oh my God, she's not going to last long without her medication. Like, truly, people were so panicked. However, this is when Aaliyah came forward, the neighborhood friend that Gypsy had been speaking to over Facebook. And Aaliyah came forward and told the police about Gypsy's secret boyfriend, Nick Godejohn. So the police, knowing this information, went onto the laptop. They soon found all of the conversations between Gypsy and Nick. They were able to track down the IP address of the Facebook account, and it led them straight to the address of Nick Godejohn's home. So it didn't take long for police in Wisconsin to surround Nick Godejohn's home because they thought this was an active killer. He could be armed and dangerous, and he possibly has kidnapped Gypsy. So the police have surrounded this home. They are shouting for Nick to come out of the home, for Gypsy to come out of the home, because they think that Gypsy is in there as a victim herself. And there is kind of a mini standoff. Nick and Gypsy are panicked. They actually hide in a closet upstairs and they discuss what their story is going to be. And then after about 20 minutes, Gypsy is the first one to leave the home. And oh my God, the shock waves that went through the community because Gypsy Rose
She walks out.
Blanchard walked out of that home. This was not what the police were expecting. They were expecting to find a child or a very young woman that had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old, couldn't walk, needed a wheelchair, and they couldn't believe their eyes that Gypsy Rose Blanchard was actually a 23-year-old woman. And she was walking. Nick soon follows and both of them are arrested. And this is when everything started to unravel. The fact that Gypsy's whole life had been a lie. The police started digging through Gypsy's medical records. They found multiple birth certificates that had 3 different dates of birth. There was one that said she was born in 91, which was obviously the real one. Then there was another one that said 93, then 95. They found out that Gypsy never had cancer, that she could walk, she clearly didn't need a wheelchair, that she didn't have any of the illnesses that she claimed to have. And this is when the penny dropped for the police, for everyone, that Dee Dee Blanchard had been abusing her very own daughter all of this time, and that Gypsy Rose was a willing accomplice in the murder of her mom. So the police have both Gypsy and Nick arrested and they take them into separate rooms for questioning. So when the police go into Gypsy, she knows how to act. She's had to act her whole life.
Well, Gypsy, we are here investigating something, so I do need to talk with you about some things, okay?
I'm thankful because I have no idea why I'm here.
Okay.
Nobody will tell me anything.
Yeah, that's fine, and that's kind of why we're here.
So she pulls out her best acting skills and the police say, so Gypsy, your mom is dead.
You need to be honest with me, and if you're involved in anything that I'm about ready to tell you, then you need to tell me, okay? Your mom's dead, okay?
And Gypsy, pulling out her best acting skills, when she hears that her mom is dead, she goes, what? Sorry, what?
Yeah, she didn't catch it in the first instance.
Your mom's dead, okay? Now, what I want to ask you is, your mom's passed away, okay? And she's deceased, all right?
Apparently, the police officer has said that this was an intended technique that they use sometimes in interrogation when they know that whoever they're interrogating is guilty or they strongly suspect someone of being guilty. They would test their reaction by mentioning the crime in this very fleeting manner, because if you have never heard or you don't know that something has occurred, then you will be deeply shocked by that. But if you know that something has happened, then you will kind of brush over it because your brain already knows it. So if they say it in this kind of like way, so this happened, and then we're jumping to topic number 2, it's a way for them to see how you react, because it really exposes your inhibitions.
Now, what I want to ask you, did you have involvement in this? Okay. Just, hang on, listen to me for just a second.
She tries to act dumb. She tries to act innocent. She tries to act like this is the first time she's hearing about the fact that her mum is dead. But the police just say, Gypsy, we know that you're involved. We know you know all of this. We know about your conversations with Nick. We know everything. Nick, in the other room, is actually giving a full confession to everything. He is not holding back. It's almost like he's kind of proud of what he's done, and he's dying to tell somebody.
You stabbed her 4?
Yeah, 4 times. The 4th one, I felt it go into, I think it might have been her lungs.
Okay.
Because it was harder to get out.
And then when Gypsy found out that Nick was giving a full confession, this is when Gypsy also confessed to her part in the murder. And in this moment, because Gypsy was so naive to the way the world worked, she genuinely believed that she wouldn't be in trouble. She wouldn't actually face a prison sentence because she wasn't the one that actually stabbed her mom. And I think that just shows how naive she is, because she has been completely isolated from the world her whole life. But obviously that was not the case. She was involved in a murder and she needs to be held accountable. And obviously following this, the news broke to the public about what had happened. And it was at this moment that it was also revealed that Gypsy Rose Blanchard was perfectly healthy. That all of the illnesses that she had apparently had her whole life, it was all a lie. And as you can imagine, every single person that has ever met Gypsy, ever met Dee Dee, was completely stunned. And also what I can't believe is that Gypsy Rose's dad, Rod, he found out that his daughter was perfectly healthy this whole time on the news after her arrest. So then finally, after about a year after the arrest, preparations were being made for the trial, and it looked like Gypsy could get a very lengthy prison sentence. She could possibly be going away for the rest of her life. But in the end, because this is such a complex case, there is literally no precedent for this case. And because there are so many mitigating factors in today's case, the state decided to only charge Gypsy Rose Blanchard with second-degree murder. And in the end, they arranged a plea deal with Gypsy that if she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, she would be given 10 years in prison, which is exactly what Gypsy did. So in 2016, 24-year-old Gypsy Rose Blanchard was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And then 2 years later, it was Nick's trial. However,
yeah, I think so. I think this case in general is very nuanced. That's why, like, there's a lot of points of contention from different points of perspective. But honestly, like, when I first found out about it, I'll be like, okay, I think it would be good to monitor Gypsy just to see what happens when she, like, has a family or anything like that. But I didn't want her to go to jail. Like, I didn't want her to go to prison. I didn't want her to have any consequences at all. Like, she suffered enough. Her entire life was a sentence, So, for Gypsy, I was like, no. Enough is enough. Let that woman be free. But keep an eye out and see what happens, yeah? For Nick, I don't know if jail forever is the answer. But definitely jail for a very long time.
In Nick's case, there is no mitigating factors. There was no long history of abuse. There was no relationship there between him and Dee Dee. Like, there was nothing. He just murdered Dee Dee. Cold-blooded murder. And he was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then we get to the aftermath of this case, which I'm sure most of you are probably aware of, but everything has gone a little bit crazy in the aftermath of this case. This case blew up on the internet when it happened in 2015, obviously again in 2016 when Gypsy was sentenced, and then again when Nick went to trial in 2018. Gypsy was also interviewed by Dr. Phil. There have been so many documentaries on this case. There was even an 8-part drama series on this case called The Act, which features Joey King playing Gypsy.
Honestly, I would like to see it. I haven't seen that.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and I highly recommend that series. It obviously is dramatized, but it is pretty accurate for the most part, and it is really, really good.
Gypsy had some issues with this one. Gypsy actually spoke out about it. She said that, like, yeah, it's a bit of a, like, fairy tale. Like, not fairy tale. Like, it's a bit misconstrued.
King is very, very good in that series. And then Dee Dee's family, obviously they had to come to terms with what has happened, and they had no sympathy for Dee Dee whatsoever. They actually flushed her ashes down the toilet. And
yeah, I heard about that.
Gypsy has been pretty busy. Gypsy herself has said that the first day that she went to prison was the best day of her life.
I heard about the family of Diddy flushing her ashes down the toilet, and honestly, what a gangster move. I love that. Exactly what she deserved.
Because she finally felt free, which is so sad. Like, no one should feel happy in prison. Like, that should not be the best day of your life. But
that was the most devastating part of it. She went to she was never free her entire life. Then she goes to prison at age 21, 23, and she feels free in prison. That is heartbreaking.
I can understand why she thought that. She has had to slowly rebuild her life. One thing that she said on the documentary, which has really stayed with me, and I think this just shows how sheltered she was from the world and the fact that she just really didn't know anything, is that when she went to prison, that is the first time that she learned about tampons. She didn't have a clue about sanitary items, like nothing. And another woman in prison had to teach her about tampons, and she's 24 years old. And I was just like, oh my god, that really does just show you how isolated she has been from the entire world and the bubble that she had been kept in by her mom. Since being in prison, Gypsy has grown out her hair. She has rebuilt her relationship with her dad and also her stepmom, Kirsty, and she's now incredibly close to both of them. She got her education in prison, and she's also entered into multiple relationships when she has been in prison. She has been engaged twice, or was it only once? And she's also gotten married in prison as well to a man named Ryan.
She's already divorced with this man, and this is something I hope I'll have time to mention about this.
Anderson, and they are still married to this very day. And they
Not
got
anymore.
married in 2022. And then we skip forward to the 28th of December, 2023. And that is the day that Gypsy Rose Blanchard, after serving 85% of her 10-year prison sentence, was released from prison. And as you can imagine, this case has now blown up again. Every single person is talking about this case. It's all over social media. Gypsy is on social media herself, and she has built up a very...
She's become an influencer. I don't know if she's still doing that because she turned it off at a certain stage, but...
large following. There is a new 6-part documentary series on this case. Highly recommend it, which I have been binge watching over the last week. And Gypsy has also released a book, which I have bought, and I have been reading it throughout the week. And it's just kind of crazy, like how this case has blown up. Like, it feels like Gypsy is everywhere.
Well, I'm doing great. I'm in New York City for the first time. I know I'm enjoying my freedom. I'm taking it day by day. It feels really, really nice to be out in the free world.
And I thought, because of all of this media attention, and I have also gotten so many requests to cover this case since Gypsy has been released from prison. And because of the documentary and the book, there are new revelations about this case that have come to light. I thought it was a good time to cover this case, even though I don't know how any of you will feel about this video, because I do realise that Gypsy Rose Blanchard is an overcovered case and most people know this story, but hopefully by the end of this video you have learned something new about this case. Hopefully this video was useful in some kind of way. And I couldn't include absolutely everything about this case because, oh my god, there is so much on this case. If I included every single little thing on this case, this video would be twice as long as it is. I just want to end this video saying I hope Gypsy is okay. You know, I don't condone murder, never will, but I just hope that she is okay. Like, everything that she has been through for those 23 years that she was abused by her mom, I just hope that she gets the help that she needs and she can try and move on and try and live a happy and fulfilled and peaceful life. And I just wish her all the best. And that brings us to the end of this crazy case. As always, let me know your thoughts, theories and opinions, and don't forget to leave me your case suggestions because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to Wild for sponsoring today's video, and that is everything from me, so I'll see you in my next video. Bye.
So thank you, Danielle, Kirsty. That was great. Please give her a follow, subscribe, and all that. She's doing some really incredible content. She releases, I think, every week or every 2 weeks. And her research is impeccable. And also, she goes into a really, like, big depth on all of the cases. So, one of the things, like, Bailey Sarian is amazing. I love Bailey Sarian's energy, but Danielle allows herself to make a much longer form content, like 2, sometimes 3 hour long video essays, and they're really good. There's a lot of information. She doesn't miss anything. But now about Gypsy Rose. So there's a couple of different points of contention. Obviously, there's that group that feels sorry for Nick about his autism, which in my opinion is fucking stupid. Like, because it kind of like, it takes away agency from autistic people. Like, yes, we can have compassion in as far of like different struggles, but let's face it, not everyone who has autism goes out and murders people and claims that they have a dark side, which is a 500-year-old vampire that is thirsty for blood. So in that sense, Nick is a goner in my case, in my diary. Like, I think he's gotten what he deserved. He had ample opportunity to not be involved. He had ample opportunity to report the abuse to the authorities, take a different route, educate himself. I don't think that autism excuses that. And I think that the narrative that because of his autism he shouldn't be held accountable actually is a detriment to autistic people, because it claims that autistic people cannot have such agency as to distinguish murder from no murder and good from evil, which I don't think is the case. I think that we should give a little bit more credit to autistic people. So in that way, disagree with that. Gypsy, honestly, I don't think she should have even been in prison for the 10 years, but fair enough. Seems like the time has served her well. And there's a bit of drama after she came out of prison. So that dude that we saw that she was engaged to, she married him, and the reason they got married is because when she was coming out, she was kind of like released for the rest of her probation in the like custody of her dad's home. Like, that was the new registered address, but her fiance at the time lived in a different state, which her parole rule wouldn't allow her to cross state border without like a formal approval. That takes time and effort, and if she was gonna travel back and forth, then she would have to do this every time, unless he was a family member. So the reason why they got married was that he was a family member, so that she had the right to go to see him without requesting the formal cross-border request travel thingy. She just like notifies him that she's going to her family member, and that her primary address was with him, and then she was going over to see her dad. So that's why they got married. And I think that the theme of her dependence on men and needing to be rescued and needing someone to sweep in and rescue her kind of continues with that. There was a story where she was flirting with another guy. In a documentary, they talk about like she was with this other guy and she was kind of between that guy or this guy, and she went with this guy. I think she went with this guy because he seemed like a safer option, which after a lifetime of such incredulous trauma, that's completely understandable. Since she has actually went back to the other guy, she's divorced this dude, and she received a ton of hate on social media. Also, she receiving a lot of hate on social media because she is very active, or at least she was. I don't know now. But Gypsy became basically an influencer. I think overnight she gathered like a following of like 10 million subscribers on TikTok or something like that. And she was doing all these old dances and stuff, and sometimes they were a little bit out of touch, and people had a little bit of problem with her because they were like, oh, she's just generating clout. She is just an attention seeker. She's doing exactly what Didi wanted, like she wants all that attention and all, which I don't agree with that point, because if you think about it, Gypsy has suffered a lifetime of abuse and complete eradication of any education or opportunity. I know she's gained her education in prison, but she's still a convict. And as we know, in America, America is a completely unforgiving land that treats no one kindly. So, it's really hard out there for convicts. And this is the one thing that she knows, how to garner people's attention and sympathy. And her story is literally the only thing that she has. So I'm not blaming her for capitalizing on this, because how else is she going to make a living? The only thing that she's ever done in her life was to present and perform publicly for the crowd. And okay, now she can be herself and find herself, but how's she gonna make a living? Okay, she has this dude, she has this husband that can take care of her, but she's used to being in front of a camera, she's used to garnering this attention. And I think it did backfire because she received a lot of hate. At one stage, I know she deactivated her social media. I don't know if she's back. But what I'm saying is that I understand why she's chosen this avenue. I don't blame her for the social media grift. And people take a little bit of an issue with her divorce story and that how she went back to the other guy, especially like she had the history with him, and I don't know if cheating was involved or not. Maybe they were still talking. Some people would consider that cheating. But to be honest with you, again, I'm cutting her too much slack, but for someone like her, with the circumstances that she had to live, she's finally free. And she had to find herself. She has to find what it means to be with somebody. She has to find what it is to be herself. And I think that getting married was a mistake, but she didn't know any better. I mean, she was dehumanized since the day she was born. So, I have patience in that case. I would say, let's pay attention to when she has a child, because if she's gonna have a baby, let's see what's gonna happen with that. Because I think that there are certain moments that she's so used to spinning the narrative. She's so used to twisting truths and narratives and PR to benefit her. Before she was doing this to benefit her mom or the story that her mom was telling her, that I think even if she doesn't fully mean to do something bad, I think it's so ingrained in her blood to spin certain narratives that it would be so easy for anyone to just get lost with the story that you're presenting. Which is I am forgiving, I am compassionate, I am patient with her falls and tribulations and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also cautious in a way of she might have very well inherited some parts of her mom. I mean, you know, blood runs thicker than water. And I'm not accusing her of having these traits. I would just say, okay, since she's a public person now, because that's her only avenue to make money, as a person who takes interest in public people, I would watch and see how it goes. With caution, with compassion, and with forgiveness, because she's been through a lot and she doesn't need more shit. Now, the question is whether she's actually going to address and heal her trauma and overcome this, or will she succumb to the pain and become a perpetrator one day? She hasn't yet, in my opinion. The thing with her mom, she was fighting for survival. I don't blame her. What are your thoughts, guys? You can tell me down below. And for now, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed yourself, like, subscribe, drop a comment. I will be back on... Ima says she simply said that things like this happen in the first place. I know. I think like the biggest failure is that of America here. Because failure to provide a good enough education to all of its citizens who live in such conditions as to, like, the family, the abuse, you know, like, I think that all of that went on the radar because of completely improper education and the failure of American education system. Another thing is the failure of the American medical system because of its privatization, because of the fact that healthcare is not free in America. There's not a centralized database for the doctors to exchange information. I don't know if that hasn't been amended since, but healthcare should be free. It's a right. Everyone deserves to be healthy. Everyone deserves to have a roof over their head. Everyone deserves the right to good education. So, in a lot of it, the downfalls of this story is a true American story, because there's a lot of problems with America. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. If you enjoyed yourself, I'll be back on Friday with more lore. I think we're finishing up we're finishing Warcraft 3. After Warcraft 3 lore, I'll put a pause on the lore live streams to make the YouTube long form videos, because I don't want to end up in a situation where I have like 20 live streams to edit and I haven't still released the video. So like the videos are gonna take a while to make and to release. So once we cover Warcraft 3, we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna catch up with the videos and then we're gonna resume. In the meantime, I'll bring Cyberpunk and The Sims back. Sounds good? I hope so. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.